Hello. Hello. Happy Thursday. Can you guys see me and hear me okay? Let me know. What is up? I didn't go live yesterday because I needed to emotionally prepare for today. He. Just kidding. Hi, welcome back. Let's see who's here. I'm gonna go over Taylor Parker and then we're gonna go right into Kenzie. I know. I've been getting a lot of messages and comments. We're definitely going to be talking all Kenzie after this, but let's get through this wild document with Taylor Parker. This talks about her criminal behavior while she's been incarcerated or was incarcerated at Bowie jail. I think that's how you say it. And I want to watch a short interview with the crime scene detectives, and then we'll go over to Kenzie and get into all of that. So, shout out to those of you that are here. And I see people became members. Hello, Evie. I saw the Attile, Hannah Paul. Hello. Thank you for becoming members. It's a really great way to support the channel. I saw Noodle in here. What up, Noodle? Screaming. Hello. Amber, workday is almost over. Girl, you better get your butt in here. Crease. Selena says, I haven't had my phone all week. I'm so happy to be here. Thank you for being here. Oh, Tamara. Yay. I was gonna say, I hope you guys let me know. If you're here from TikTok, hello, shout out to you. Let me know though, because sometimes I know usernames are thank you, Selena. My hair looks great, really. Thank you. Laura. Hello, Laura. Screaming Daisies, Jules, Angel, yes, yeah, Vicky. I am here. Okay, good. This document isn't very long, so considering I read pretty fast and we got through that other document in like less than 2 hours, this is only like 30 pages. But let's get into it. Thank you, Tamara. Um, hmm. Okay, let me pull up my screen. Hello, Andrea. And hello, Barbie. What's up, Barbie? I want to talk some shit, but we'll wait for the next live. Not me trying to be petty already. Oh no. Warning. It is Thirsty Thursday. Hey Joker. So let's behave before we misbehave, shall we? Okay, Taylor Parker, maternal instinct, baby kidnapper, unalived Reagan and Braxton, RIP to them. This was filed in 2022, obviously before she went to death row. The state of Texas, through first assistant criminal district attorney for Bowie County and the above titled numbers. I'm going to skip like some of this legal talk. Currently, case number presently pending in this court and are set for jury trial on or about August 1st. So this is first supplement notice of intent to use extraneous offenses. So like prior bad acts and behavior in jail, pretty much. Texas Rules of Evidence, the undersigned assistant district hereby gives notice to defendant and her counsel that the state intends to introduce in its case in chief evidence of other crimes, wrongs, or acts for the purpose of proving motive, opportunity, intent, preparation, plan, knowledge, identity, absence of mistake or accident, common plan, or scheme. District attorney hereby gives a notice defendant and his counsel that the state intends to introduce in its case in chief and punishment phase of trial evidence that the defendant has been convicted of a felony or crime of moral turpitude. Gives defendant her counsel that the state intends to introduce in the punishment phases evidence of prior criminal record of the defendant, her general reputation, her background and character and opinion regarding her character and the circumstances of the underlying offense, and notwithstanding rules 404, 405 of the Texas Rules of Evidence. So I'm assuming they use this. The extraneous offenses and or prior convictions which the state intends to introduce at trial above are as followed, all occurring in Bowie, Cass, Titus, Morris counties in Texas and or Miller County, Arkansas, unless otherwise noted. This is crazy. Some of this stuff in here, like, get ready for it, because like Taylor is on something else. That is someone who deserves penalty and to be in prison for life. Well, I'm here from Alive. Love all your videos and work. Thank you, blessings. I'm glad you guys didn't unsubscribe. There's so much haters out there. We'll talk about it later. Hey, inside the mind of Noel. Finally joining for a non-MS life. Thank you. Y'all are real ones, the ones that are here. You too, Tamara. I can make you mod too after, Tamara. Let's continue. This is about to get wild. So it says Taylor Parker, aka Taylor Morton, aka Taylor Wakazi, herein after sometimes the defendant or Taylor Parker. On or about October 9th, 2020 in Bowie County, the defendant did commit the offense of capital murder as charged in the indictment in the cause number. The defendant did commit the offenses of capital murder and felony murder as charged in both counts of the indictment in the cause number. Okay, and then it lists her case number. The defendant did commit the offense of kidnapping as charged in the indictment. To carry out her crimes, and as part of her ongoing deceptive, fraudulent behavior, the defendant held herself out as being pregnant from on or about January 2020 through on or about October 9th, 2020. So if you missed the first live, we talked about her behavior and like her mental health. And I think that is so important. And I wish that would have been explored in the Kenzie case. I think it's important. And it's interesting to have actually known the facts from that document to this. So if you missed that live, I definitely recommend you go watch it. The defendant underwent I need to stop saying the defendant underwent a permanent sterilization procedure on or about January 24th, 2014, and a total abdominal hysterectomy on or about August 4th, 2015. The defendant was physically unable to bear children. The defendant was aware of the fact, as she reported to most every medical care provider, that she underwent a hysterectomy. Prior to the fake pregnancy with Clancy Gale in January of 2020, the defendant had faked several prior pregnancies, including a fake pregnancy with Hunter Parker, 2 fake pregnancies between Hunter Parker and Wade Griffin, and a fake pregnancy with twins when she first met Wade Griffin. Wait, did we know that? Is that on the documentary? I didn't know she had faked a pregnancy with Parker. Hunter, I believe it was his first name. Oh yeah, Hunter. I did not know that. That was not in the documentary. Hey, we never heard that. Oh, wow. Wow. See, we learned a lot. In the previous document, it was like Kenzie or oh my God, Kenzie. Taylor had like mental health issues, like psychopath traits. So it's interesting to come over here and read this document and like see how that factors into this. But I did not know she had faked that. Netflix definitely left that part out, as far as I'm concerned. No, that was not in the doc that I recall. Okay, so we're all kind of on the same page. Laura says this chick is beyond psychotic. Yeah, I know. This is wild. So she faked how many pregnancies? 2 with Hunter and Wade, in a and a fake pregnancy with twins. This is totally Laura Owens. If you don't follow that, we're probably going to resume on her tomorrow. This reminds me of her. With the Clancy Gale pregnancy, the defendant used various social media platforms, more than one cellular phone, and a fabricated supporting evidence and documentation. During one of the fake pregnancies, the defendant told Donnie Wakazi that she was pregnant. Whoa. Donnie asked the defendant how it was possible that the defendant was pregnant, and that the defendant said, quote, "It's a miracle. All my stuff grew back," end quote. What? She meant like her uterus and stuff grew back. I'm shook. This is like how much Netflix documentaries leave things out and make decisions on putting specific information in that's going to change the perspective of stuff in the eyes of the public. Does that make sense? Am I rambling? That's crazy. Okay, sorry, I was taking a drink and I didn't want to be rude. Manners. Okay, let's move on. When the defendant was with Hunter Parker, she told Abby and Mackenzie Bright that she miscarried twin girls. The defendant wanted Abby and Mackenzie to act as a surrogate for her after the miscarriage. The defendant told Abby and Mackenzie she would take care of all of the details and set up the doctor's appointments and take care of everything. The defendant told Bright, oh, so that's a girl named Mackenzie. The defendant told Bright that she was going to be coming into money when her grandmother Peggy died. The defendant was going to use the money that was given to her by Peggy to pay the surrogate fee. As part of her fake pregnancy, the defendant would post ultrasound photographs on social media, make claims of sickness during pregnancy, and would tell everyone how excited she was to have a baby. Excerpts from the defendant's extensive social media search warrants return are produced below. The state of Texas hereby gives notice of intent to introduce a complete and total copy of the defendant's social media and or search history and or location history and or Google history, Google IMEI, or any other relative content in the trial. The defendant also searched extensively for her victim. She used Google to research different hospitals, clinics, stores of locations where pregnant women and or infants would be located. Okay, that I also didn't know, because in the documentary, it only states that she was stalking pregnant women outside the doctor's office. But girl, she has been Googling all of them everywhere. Stores. Oh my God. We are not safe anymore. Um, I can't even with Taylor Parker, dude. So it says the defendant would search out places potential victims would likely be found and would travel to those locations. The defendant searched for and or went to Paris, Texas, Texarkana, Texas, Mount Pleasant, Shreveport, Louisiana. What? Hope, Arkansas, Idabel, Oklahoma. And other places searching for a potential victim. Did she get charged with, well, I guess it doesn't matter because she got murder, but and death penalty. But like what a creepo. The defendant conducted extensive online research into vaginal and C-section births, the requirement to become a midwife, and how to register a home birth, etc. The complete and total search warrant returned from her emails. She had one, two, three, four emails that shows extensive research and planning on the part of the defendant. The defendant also had Yahoo emails accounts, two of them. The state of Texas hereby gives notice to intent to introduce the information from each and every one of the defendant's email accounts. Below are some experts from the state of Texas hereby gives notice of intent to introduce a complete copy, okay, of the online searches made from January 2020 to the date of the crime, October 9th, 2020, including the times, dates, and locations of her searching for a potential victim in locations throughout Texas, Arkansas, Oklahoma, and or Louisiana. She was for sure the baby snatcher. It's delusional. Hey ATS, what's up, girl? Still don't know how this is sick. It is sick. Now you have to worry about this kind of people when you leave your pregnancy check appointment, your gyno visit. Jeez, that's crazy. Hey, Frenchie, good to see you, babe. The state of Texas give notice to introduce intent. Okay, from her emails. All right, we got it. Cell phone, tower data, or call details and or cell phone dump information and or relevant information or evidence recovered from her phone numbers. These are public documents, by the way. You can find them online anywhere. Sorry, I have to pray for me. My allergies are bad. Okay, so search warrants for the following social media accounts: Snapchat, Facebook, Facebook Messenger, any and all communication from the defendant's fictitious characters, including but not limited to Mandy Boyd. So that was one of her names, Mandy Boyd, Shelly Links, Bill Brandt, John Reynolds, Linda Hall, Lisa from the bank, Brian at D&Z, Uncle Butch, what? Tony Hammond's buddy, Tim, Taylor's sister, attorney John Mark. She was pretending to be all these people. Blake Landon, all of which are attributable to the defendant. Text or voice messages to or from spoof phone numbers attributed to the defendant, including but not limited to Brian, Bill, Mark, Uncle Butch, Katie. Okay. Jada. Whoa. Okay, so you see when you only see like a side of things, that's wild. She definitely was. This is like proof of premeditation. The state of Texas also gives notice to introduce text message conversations between the defendant and other individuals that were recovered during the investigation and case. The state of Texas also gives notice of intent to introduce the complete and total records received from First National Bank, Texar Credit Union, Millway, Red River, complete and total records recovered from Texas Health and Human Services. That Taylor Parker, aka Taylor Morton, aka Taylor Wakazi, repeatedly and continuously engaged in welfare and benefits fraud, beginning from December 17th, 2010 to October 9th, 2020. I did not know that either. I don't think that was included in the documentary, right? She committed welfare fraud. What? This is actually wild. This is so many person. It makes sense now. Like all of these stalking behaviors totally make sense as to how she was stalking like Reagan and stuff. It's really scary. Um so for 10 years she committed welfare and benefits fraud. That is not cool. Hey JLu. Yeah, I'm glad you're here. Oh, okay, good to know. Netflix low-key cannot be trusted. After this Kenzie stuff, no. Facts. We'll talk about that later, though. The defendant misrepresented certain facts and failed to report certain facts that resulted in the defendant receiving benefits and or welfare greater than to which the defendant was lawfully entitled. The defendant, at a minimum, repeatedly and continuously pursuant to a continuing criminal episode or scheme, reported a series of lies that include, but are not limited to, lies about her personal finances, lies about household finances, lies and total household income, lies about bogus health conditions, including pregnancy, lies about persons living in the household, lies about her marital status to qualify for benefits. The state of Texas hereby gives notice of intent to introduce the complete set of records produced by the Texas Department of Health and Human Services. The state of Texas hereby gives notice to, oh, wait, did I just repeat that? The state of Texas gives notice to introduce a full and complete copy of the defendant's medical records, employment records, including wages earned, cell phone records, social media records, banking records for herself and or any other recovered records relevant to this time period. At the end of each application for benefits is a section marked, quote unquote, "My answers are true." The application then states, we know what this states. I certify under penalty of perjury, that this is all true. So they're basically saying that welfare benefits fraud is a felony offense in the state of Texas. Each time the defendant renewed her benefits and or reapplied using a supplemental application and provided false information and or omitted relevant information, she committed a separate felony offense. The defendant has been incarcerated in the Bowie County, Texas jail since her extradition from state of Oklahoma on or about October 14th, 2020. Since her arrival at the jail, she has repeatedly and continuously engaged in criminal behavior, violations of jail policy, and has continued her fraudulent pattern of lying and misrepresenting most all aspects of her medical history and medical status. The defendant has access to an email kiosk and the jail telephone system. Defendant also discusses her bogus medical claims on these jail emails, telephone calls, and jail letters. Oh, baby, we need to get those. I'm on it. I'm on it ASAP after the live. What? I'm sure we'll see some of them here, if not all of them. Probably not all of them. The state of Texas hereby gives notice of intent to introduce a defendant's statements regarding her bogus medical status recovered through the email system, the jail telephone system, and the defendant's. Did I just repeat myself? The state of Texas also gives notice of intent to introduce a complete copy of the defendant's medical and mental health records. In addition to the records discussed, the state notice of intent to use extraneous offenses. The state also intends to introduce a complete copy of the defendant's medical records from Wadley Hospital, Paris OBGYN, Pulmonary and Internal Medical, County Memorial Hospital, Longview Wellness Point, LifeNet, and Turnkey Medical records from the Bowie County Jail. The medical care providers the state intends to call at the jury trial in this matter include, but are not limited to, and they list like 15 people, maybe 10. The defendant insisted on having an oxygen tank in her jail cell at the Bowie County, and then the defendant would be observed by jail staff not using the oxygen. Wow. Subsequent medical testing revealed that the defendant was not in need of the assistance of oxygen. Mm. That is wild. So she like straight up went from living out in society to behind the bars, and she was still doing the same shit. Hey hoodies, good to see you, love. Thank you for being here. I cringe at kiosk. I know. Habalitas and hi Debbie, good to see you. Smelly cat. Um, hmm. Interesting. The defendant also engaged in repeated violations of jail policy by having her mother, Shauna, put money on other inmates' commissary accounts to avoid paying Bowie County monies that Parker owed for her medical bills. The policy at the jail is a portion of each inmate's accounts will be garnished, and the money that is recovered from the garnishment will be put towards whatever money that the inmate owes. As of February 2022, Taylor Parker owes over $2,260 to Bowie County for medical expenses. Parker repeatedly tells her mother to put money on other inmates' accounts, and as payment, Parker and her mother buy commissary items for the inmates. Okay. And I don't mean to judge. Hey, Edith. Good to see you too. I just saw you, babe. And hey, Queen Bella. Okay. Hold on. What is going on with the mom? Because we know the mom had something to do with the hysterectomy. Clearly, here the mom is helping her behind jail while like helping her do these things. I get it. It's your daughter. You want to help. Like, but lady, you're being sus. You also knew she wasn't pregnant. Hmm. The inmates receive the commissary paid for by Parker's mother and then give the commissary to Parker. From on or about August 2021 through on or April, May of 2022, her mother, acting as Taylor Parker's direction, ordered commissary items under the names of several inmates. Those inmates include, but are not limited to, Christina, another Christina, Tammy, okay, a bunch of people, Brittany, Whitney. The defendant has access to an email kiosk and the jail telephone system. Defendant also discusses her schemes and scams on these jail calls and telephone calls. She also discusses her schemes and scams in jail letters. The state of Texas hereby gives notice of intent to introduce a defendant's statements regarding her fraudulent schemes and scams recovered through the email system and the jail telephone system and letters written out by the defendant. The defendant repeatedly and continuously rips up or modifies her jail clothing and then complains about it to her parents. Okay, well, that must be a thing then in prison. Like, with the clothes because Kenzie was doing the same. And at the end of the day, I think I realized, like, probably, that clothes is gross, ugly, smelly, all of the above. So, hmm. The defendant will ask her parents to send her money for new jail clothes. On or about January 5th, 2022, the defendant is talking about the correctional officers to her dad. She writes to John, quote, I'm in lockdown from yesterday till Friday because we have the shit crew, so not able to call until Friday. I was trying to see if you were able to put money on my books. I need to get new warm clothes. I've had mine for a year, holes in front of them. The defendant failed to tell her father that she rips the shoulders and neck out of her jail clothing so that the clothes are more revealing. On or about January 6, 2022, Parker tells her dad, thank you for the money, and tells him that she's ordering new clothes with the money. On or about January 28th, 2022, the defendant tells her mother that she needs new clothing because her shirts have holes in them. The defendant fails to mention to her mother that the shirts have holes in them because the defendant tries to alter her clothing to appear more provocative. The state of Texas hereby gives notice of intent to introduce photographs of the defendant's altered jail clothing. Each time the defendant logs onto the jail email kiosk, and the kiosk takes the defendant's photograph. These photographs reveal that the defendant's clothing has been intentionally altered. The state of Texas hereby provides notice of intent to introduce these photographs. The defendant repeatedly and continuously refers to the shit crew in her jail communications with her family. The shit crew refers to the correctional officers who apply the jail procedures and security measures equally to Taylor Parker and do not give her special treatment. This is actually wild. Is it possible? No, this girl's worse. Yeah, they had well, I don't know. Someone said about the mom, maybe the mom thinks she's so mentally ill that she just does what she thinks will help. Hmm. I thought the mother warned them of the lies. I didn't hear that in the Netflix documentary. Huh. Interesting. The defendant has been incarcerated at Bowie County, Texas since her jail extradition from the state of Oklahoma on or about October 14th, 2020. Since her arrival at the jail, she has repeatedly and continuously maintained multiple romantic relationships with other inmates. The defendant alters her jail clothing so that it's more revealing, makes attempts to flirt with her other inmates, and maintains various jailhouse romances. Wow. Several individuals have observed the defendant with her altered jail clothing and exposed shoulders, including but not limited to Marlon. The defendant has discussed the details of the case, including her possible alternative perpetrator theories with Lana. On or about September 24th, 2021, Parker told a provider she was lonely and was tired of being around all the females. Parker has sought and maintained several romantic relationships during her incarceration at the Bowie County Jail. These relationships, in addition to the relationship with female inmate Lana, including relationships with male inmates, mm, Travis and Adam. I'm not aware of how you date when you're both in jail. So she's had numerous relationships with females and two males. She is also writing inmates from other correctional facilities, such as Allen and Augustine. The state of Texas hereby provides notice of intent to introduce the defendant's statements and communications with these individuals. Taylor Parker has her friends and family get in contact with potential romantic interest. Um, who is doing that? Through the toilet, I hear. Mm. Does that work? I know I saw it on Orange is the New Black, but I wasn't ever sure. Hey, Calista Cats, good to see you. Hey, Drakey. Wait, so who of her friends and family were helping? I'm interested to see because that's weird. After what she just did, I know that her family will probably like quote unquote love her forever, forever. But who would want to be friends with her after what she did? For example, on or about September 2021 and continuing for months, Parker starts asking her family to contact her boyfriends. On or about September 2nd, 2021, Parker sends a jail email to Shauna saying, "Do me a favor, please. Look up Travis on Facebook. He told me to call him when I got my kiosk working, but I trashed his number by accident. He was a trustee here, but went home." Wow. Kirkland, his trust buddy, left for SAFP yesterday, so I can't get it from him. Just say Parker got her kiosk. What's your email? He will give it to you. On or about September 2021 through on or about January 2022, Parker uses jail phone calls, and jail emails to contact friends and family about arranging communications with Travis. On or about September 12th, 2021, the defendant is again emailing Christina. "I need a sugar daddy to load me OME money on this damn thing. LMAO. Anything on blocker, which is Travis. Oh, redacted is Brad from Sims. Text him and add me so I can talk to him. Or message him for me on Facebook, please. I miss you bunches. I'm lonely. Sad face. I hate this." In January of 2022, the defendant sends her mother a message for her mother to pass to Travis. Ah, so her mother is playing Cupid, huh? Yeah, I don't know how I feel about that. She could be spinning the stories again. I mean, if her mom is putting money for her accounts to be doing all this stuff. Hey, Alexa. Um, and hey, Crystal. Let's continue. On or about September 13, 2021, Parker is again sending emails to Christina and says, "Have you Facebook Travis yet? Will you do that this week for me, please? Also, text Brad, tell him to add me on Gel ATM Com or Facebook. I need some men to talk to. I wrote that one you told me, the pen pal. It's boring as hell and lonely." Facebook because her mom's running it. That's wild. On or about September 24th, 2021, Parker told a provider she was lonely and was tired of being around all the females. Parker has sought and maintained several romantic relationships during her incarceration at the Bowie County Jail. These relationships, in addition to the relationship with the female inmate Lana, includes relationships with male inmates, Travis and Adam. She is also writing inmates from other correctional facilities such as Allen and Augustine. Taylor has had her friends and family get in contact with did I already read this? Yeah, I did. My bad. On or about December 15, 2021, the defendant is exchanging jail emails with Alan. Polly asks, which is Alan, asks Parker why she's in jail, and Parker replies, "Unfortunately, I can't talk details about information wise since I'm in pretrial. I don't go to trial until 2022, September. I'm innocent." Assuming you have been to jail before, you know how unjust our bullshit system is. Parker also writes on that date, "It does suck, but I have a great team. I have become very close with he and have all the faith that it will work out. I do freelance recruiting for manufacturing industrial plans in the killed trade departments on top of breeding and selling cattle. You can say I'm a farm girl. Please don't think I want anything from you. A very independent, respectful person." How are you innocent when you cut a baby out of someone's womb? What's with these moms making I know. The victim's family hate it too. I've cut people off for far less, right? She reminds me of Wade Wilson. This is wild. On or about November 5th, 2021, Taylor Parker and Augustine Diaz an inmate in the Texas Department of Criminal Justice have become romantically involved and exchange sexually explicit letters. The state of Texas give notice of intent to introduce the letters written by the defendant in exchange with Diaz and others at the trial of this cause. Experts of the sexually explicit letters exchanged between Parker and Diaz are reproduced in this notice. However, the state of Texas hereby gives notice of intent to introduce each and every letter of written form of the defendant and each of her jailhouse love interests, including Augustine. On or about December 24th, 2021, the defendant asked Augustine if he has a jail ATM system he can use so they can exchange electronic messages. The defendant adds, I thought of this morning in the shower. Dirty mind. In another writing dated December 24th, 2021, the defendant writes Diaz, I'm going I'm gonna snuggle down with my book. If you keep me warm at night, I definitely wouldn't mind a poke. Just saying. I'm very reserved and I'm one to leave our private bedroom time to us only. But honey, I'm a freak. Just saying. You and that manly mind. LOL. Unbelievable. I can't. She says she wants to get poked. What's wrong with her? Like she took someone's yes, Tamara, I have covered the Rebecca Park case too. Wow. The defendant, Shihoni. The defendant goes on to explain that her ex used to call her fat or say she disgusted him. Wait, 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 wait. What ex? Is this Mr. Wade? Wade used to call her this? I would be interested to know. That's disgusting. Who's calling her that? Because we didn't hear that in the documentary either, Mr. Wade. If it was Wade, I don't know. Let's find out. The defendant added, if I gained an ounce, he would hit me. It broke me really. She could be lying. More my heart than anything, Parker says. So if you don't like big ass thighs, we won't work, darling. She tells Augustine she values honesty. Please, she says, I have said this before. I'm so understanding. Just don't lie to me. She explains her devotion to him and says, I'd love to build a home and family with you based on God. Okay, this is a problem. This is a problem. Nini, you're funny. Um, the baby ended up not living. No, no, no. Hello, where you been? I was worried about you. Oh, y'all, I got stuff to talk about after this live, but just wait. Just wait. But yes, listen, this girl full blown needs to be in a mental institution. And I mean that respectfully. We need to get those back. We need to normalize them more. They need to be covered under the whatever county, state funds, insurances. Like, this is crazy. She needs to go to the mental hospital and then maybe death row. Like, she has problems, clearly. That's a dream, and I hope I will hold on to and pray. She wants Agustin to know how serious she is about him. She says, I would never play someone's emotions. Games are not for me. I will voice that loud and fucking clear. I want to plan for the future. Hun, what future? Have you lost your damn mind in there? Like, does she not realize she just took a baby like Facebook poked? No, I think she means like, eggplant poked because she's talking about cuddling. So she's like, I wouldn't mind if I got poked. Yeah, gross. The defendant shares with Augustine, I love to read, but my true joy is writing. I love every part of putting together a story. The defendant explains that she's a good singer and a few venues have wanted her to sing before. She says that she would love to play around with it at home on a home system database. In another letter, Taylor writes, I got to tell you this, E, says Parker. I got to tell you this. So, E says, Parker girl, I got some much needed D this weekend. Wait, who got D? I I gotta tell you this. So E says, Parker girl, I got some much needed D this weekend. She told me all about it, showed me the bruises. I said, damn, you released the tension beast. We were rolling. I said, get some bruises for me too, please. LMAO. I told her I was so sexually frustrated. If I won, I'd be humping the light poles all the way home. She said, I'm going to pray until then. Take advantage of those wet dreams. LMAO. I about fell off the chair at the table. Had to tell you about three, three out funny moment. No thanks. B12 says, yeah, poked with a lethal injection. I wonder if she has ever said anything truthful. Listen, this is wild behavior, dude. That's a little much. On or about December 3rd, 2021, the defendant discusses a scheme to order commissary under another inmate's name to avoid paying her medical bills, and the defendant asks her mother about contacting another man for her. The defendant says, wish I had someone to order under, but I don't. I know we talked about this a few months back. Will you just message Justin and see if he is open to messaging me or writing? Please, mom. So I have someone to talk with. He won't be ugly. He knows you're my mom. If he says no, that's okay. It's his right, but I doubt he will. Please. Her mother replies, there are hundreds of Justins on Facebook, and I'm not going to message anyone in a relationship. I'm sorry you don't have anyone to talk with. The defendant refuses to let it go. She tells her mother, I respect that. Do not message if he's in a relationship. Of course, you're right. Look on Cody's Facebook. It's the Justin from Stevens, Arkansas. If it shows he's not in a relationship, please message him. Cheyenne is Cody's sister, wrote me a letter and said he had asked Cody about me. That's what caused me to want to reach out to him. I would rather someone in my family reach out to him than someone not 100% reliable. On or about January 4th, 2022, the defendant is telling her mother messages she wants her mother to pass to Travis, a jailhouse boyfriend. Taylor writes, got a note from Travis. They are moving him to Annex. He wants to stay in touch. Said to have you add him. He will add money to his kiosk to message. So when you get home and settle tonight, add Travis on Gel ATM. Message him and say you're my mom and he and want when he wants to send me messages, do it to you and you can forward to me. But that I'll write him through the mail. Taylor adds another note for her mother to forward to Travis later that same day. Send tonight, please. Hey, mean mugger, so we can message back and forth. I know you suck at keeping in contact. I was told they moved you. It's gonna suck not seeing you or hearing you scream, babe, I love you down the hallway. LOL. Too bad you didn't refuse to go. By the time I tried to get you a note, you were gone. So, did they tell you why they wouldn't let you be a trustee this time around? Did you evade arrest? I think Bowie County is full of shit. FYI, don't be writing about your perverted dreams. I would hate for my mom to read about what you're thinking about her daughter. LMAO. XOXO. This is I I have like no words. She's totally in it. Yeah. On or about January 31st, 2022, the defendant tries to get her father to send Travis messages. She writes, do me a favor tonight and look up inmate Travis on this app. Message him and say Taylor said to tell you to message you if he wants to message me. That is ridiculous. The defendant has been incarcerated in the Bowie County, Texas jail since her extradition from state of Oklahoma on or about October 15th, 2020. Since her arrival at the jail, she has repeatedly and continuously engaged in criminal behavior, including a massive fraudulent scheme directed at fabricating evidence, tampering with witnesses, and ultimately framing a mentally fragile inmate named Hannah for the crime. What? The scheme also involved Hannah, Shanna Ray, Sylvia, Kaylee, Lana, and Phyllis. The state of Texas hereby gives notice of intent to introduce at trial Each and every letter, note, or document relevant to the scheme perpetuated or perpetrated by Parker. Below is a summary of the scheme, including experts from the few of the relevant documents. The evidence at trial will include, but not limited to, the following as it relates to the frame up scheme. No, she did not. She tried to pin it at a. She's actually scary. She's evil. I agree. Okay, let's see what this was about. On or about January 2021, Hannah, an inmate at the Bowie County, submitted writings to jail staff that were pertinent to the homicide case involving Taylor Parker. Law enforcement personnel interviewed Hannah at the Bowie County Jail and discovered a twisted and extremely complicated plot developed by Taylor Parker to ultimately implicate Hannah in these crimes and exonerate Parker. The state of Texas hereby gives notice of intent to introduce the documents and letters, okay, by Hannah, including but not limited to the defendant's handwritten notes outlining what Hannah's witness statement was supposed to say. Parker provided details of the murder to Hannah Hannah and had Hannah write out those details in a fabricated witness statement. Hannah told law enforcement that the letter was not true, and the information contained in the letter was provided by Parker. Parker told Hannah to tell the police that Hannah observed a black car with wheels and occupied with a black male making rug drops around the jail. Hannah was to tell the police that the black car was the same vehicle that Hannah had seen at the murder scene. Hannah was to give her false witness statement to CO Bradley and then request an interview with law enforcement. Hannah's interview to law enforcement was supposed to corroborate her false witness statement and the confession. In jailhouse conversations with Hannah, Parker revealed what actually happened during the murders. Parker said she went to the Hancock residence the night before the murder, and the two had gotten into an argument. Parker said that Reagan knew that Parker had been faking a pregnancy and was past the due date. Parker asked Reagan to call Wade Griffin on the morning on October 9th, 2020, and pretend to be an attending nurse to Parker. Reagan was supposed to tell Wade that Taylor had lost the baby while Wade was hauling hogs, but Reagan backed out and refused to call Griffin. So that's her alleged reason why she attacked her and why they were getting into an argument. I was gonna say, I believe the argument part because why would you just go over there and well, I take that back. She could have just wanted to murder her, and it seemed like, yeah, there was actually something going on, so she was trying to force Reagan to do this. This is actually fucking crazy. Parker told Hannah that she was in possession of a bag with medical equipment in it. Parker used a scalpel, a knife, and a jar to unalive Reagan. A jar? Parker removed the baby from Reagan and put the baby on the couch to attempt CPR. Parker said she watched Reagan die and left the residence with the baby. Parker said it didn't really go as planned. Parker also told Hannah about hiding evidence and fleeing to Idabel, Oklahoma. Parker's plan was to tell them she'd just given birth and then take the baby home to her boyfriend and tell Griffin the baby was theirs. Hannah also reported that she was afraid of Parker because of Parker's ability to manipulate COs and other inmates. Hannah believed that Parker would hurt her if given the chance. This aligns with that document we read in the last live about this case because remember the mental health professional says like she will continue, she cannot stop. Yeah, exactly. Manipulate COs. I have questions. Unhinged, that's for sure unhinged. Wow. Okay, let's continue. On January 28, 2021, the Texas Department of Public Safety Special Agent Briscoe interviewed inmate Shauna Ray at the Bowie County Jail. According to Shauna Ray, we'll call her Shauna Ray. According to Shonnery, there was a 13-page handwritten document given to her by Taylor Parker in a sealed envelope, and Parker asked Shonnery to get the document to the Texarkana Gazette newspaper because Shonnery was formerly employed by the newspaper. The document is an elaborate story detailing events leading up to, including the unaliving of Reagan and the kidnapping of the baby, Braxton. Parker gave the letter to Shawnery and told her that Hannah had given the letter to Parker. The defendant claimed not to have read the letter. The defendant asked Shawnery to copy the letter in her own writing and then destroy the original. Taylor Parker also writes a document addressed to, quote, Mama Sylvia, who was determined to be an inmate. In this document, Parker denies committing the murders and accuses authorities of fabricating or withholding evidence which would prove Parker's innocence. Taking a baby out of someone's womb, what is you trying to even say? What innocence? Parker claims not to be able to remember what happened on my way home, referring to the time period of the killings, and also mentions law enforcement and authorities are withholding information about the same time period Parker doesn't remember. A comparison of the 13-page confession and the document addressed to Sylvia may appear in different handwriting. However, the state has learned during the course of investigation that Parker is known to practice altering her handwriting style. In fact, a comparison of known samples of Parker's handwriting shows a wide degree of variation. The state believes both letters were authored by Parker. The defendant offered money to inmates to assist her in carrying out these fraudulent schemes. The defendant offered Shawnery $5,000 to get documents to the newspaper. The defendant offered Phyllis $15,000 to take an envelope out of the jail and get the envelope to the newspaper. Tampering with a witness is a felony offense in the state of Texas. Even while incarcerated, Parker continues to engage in criminal activity by deceiving and manipulating other criminals into committing crimes for her, with the exception of being paid large sums of money that Parker does not have. On February 11th, 2021, former inmate Phyllis was interviewed by the Texas Department of Public Safety agent Special Agent Briscoe. Briscoe was in possession of another letter from the same fictitious DC addressed to Sylvia. Special agent told Agent Davis that, oh, wait, who's Dawson? Yeah. Dawson, special agent, told Davis that Parker said DC was a detective for Texarkana who was helping her out. So nothing bad would happen to Parker and that Parker was going to get out. Parker asked Dawson to write a letter to DC, which Dawson said he had done and that DC had not written back. Oh, I get it. Okay, so Phyllis is Dawson. So Phyllis told the special agent that Parker said DC was a detective. Phyllis and Parker asked her to send Phyllis said Parker asked her to send letters off to the newspaper in jail. Phyllis turned over a sealed envelope containing a 10-page confession letter which had been given to her by Taylor Parker. Parker had recruited Phyllis to take the letter and mail it out once Dawson was released from jail. This 10-page confession letter was another variation of the 13-page confession, which was given to Shawnery by Parker. Both detail a similar course of events leading up to the murders. Both have a theme of blaming someone else for the crimes and portraying Parker as an innocent victim. The 10-page confession again details a chain of events entirely inconsistent with the evidence in the case, but does not contain some specific details of the murder, again, which have not been released to the public and would only be known by someone with personal knowledge. She's in there just being a shit show. If only she could focus her talents on good instead of evil. Where's she getting this money from? She's a damn liar. Yeah, just another lie. We never really found out what made Parker this way to begin with. Well, in the last slide, we read the trial, or what was it? The appeal. and apparently she's like a psychopath. She has psychopath traits, so I guess that could probably play a role into it. What jail is she in? Bowie County at this time. At prison, I don't know what the name of the prison is. Dawson also turned over a puzzle book that held numerous papers. Written around the pages of the puzzle book were instructions similar to instructions located elsewhere, which direct the recipient on to where to send certain documents for Parker. These instructions were copied into the book by Phyllis at the direction of Parker. There were other notes written in the book authored by Phyllis. Those writings are instructions from Parker telling telling Phyllis to find someone to lie to the police. It includes a direct script of what the fake witness is supposed to tell law enforcement. The script is meant to go along with a letter. It coincides with the contents of both the 13-page confession and the 10-page confession, but is intended to introduce an eyewitness to corroborate the details in the confession letters. Parker writes, quote, "Be smart, Granny. Pick someone smart who will bring the details to life. Once it's done, and Detective Chris says, I will mail you $500. A document recovered from Lana at the Bowie County Jail contains a detailed description of Parker's fraudulent scheme and what evidence and witnesses Parker plans to use to exonerate herself. Parker gave Addison instructions not to turn over the master plan to law enforcement. However, law enforcement ended up recovering the document from a search of Lana's cell. Parker believes that discovery of new evidence will be enough to release her from jail and dismiss her charges. Parker names Hannah as the suspect, and Shauna, Kaylee, and Lana are set to be her witnesses. The defendant would attempt to get other inmates, including but not limited to Kaylee and Lana, to discover evidence at various locations in Bowie County and turn the evidence over to law enforcement. The scheme relied on inmates playing their parts and following through on fabricating statements and discovering evidence. This is actually crazy. Is she dumb? Like, did she not know that they would be reading everything? Clearly not. That's wild. Law enforcement recovered a series of letters and or notes that are believed to be authored by Taylor. Inmate witnesses such as Shawnery and Kaylee and others reported information about the defendant having differences in her handwriting samples. The defendant is taking steps to alter her handwriting to avoid being implicated in the plot to frame Hannah in the murders. On or about April 6th, the handwriting expert from the Texas Department of Public Safety issued a report stating that whoever authored the submitted documents, quote, included distorted and potentially unnaturally prepared handwriting, low individuality, moderate to high reproductibility, I can't even say that, reproducibility, pen lifts, and hesitation, which could all be an attempt to disguise or deliberation. Hmm. Therefore, it may not be possible to identify or eliminate a subject as a writer of these particular documents. The report goes on, based on the known handwriting of Taylor Parker, she has the ability and skill to have created the handwriting on these documents. Wow. The defendant has been incarcerated in the Bowie County, Texas jail since her extradition. Okay. Since her arrival at the jail, she has repeatedly and continuously engaged in criminal behavior, violations of jail policy, and her continued fraudulent pattern of lying and misrepresenting most all aspects of her medical history. If it's not a flat out fabrication of a medical condition, it's a dramatic exaggeration of a medical condition. The defendant has disrupted jail operations to such a degree that Bowie County Jail has had to alter several of their policies and procedures. For example, the defendant would put in sick calls and then use the time she was being transported to the jail medical department to flirt with her boyfriend or pass notes. At this point, she probably doesn't care about freaking her behavior, she probably knows that she was going to get the DP. Hey, K Bella. Yeah, this is wild. When the medical staff started examining the defendant at the defendant's cell, instead of taking the defendant to medical department, the defendant became upset. The defendant also becomes furious when the typical jail procedures for security are applied to her. The defendant does not want to be handcuffed in the back and gets angry when she's not handcuffed in the front. Members of the medical staff have complained that the defendant is not properly restrained. On one occasion, Marlon observed the defendant walking around jail without restraints. On another occasion, the defendant was taken to the medical department for a sick call and got mad because the medical staff requested that the defendant be handcuffed in the back. The defendant said, "I am not staying in here and putting up with this bullshit." On or about November 5th of 2021, the defendant was taken for a mental health session and was not handcuffed when she arrived. When the provider reminded the officer that the defendant slash offender needed to be handcuffed, the defendant became visibly agitated. The defendant would put in repeated jail call sick calls, and then refuse treatment or medication if the defendant was not going to be transported at a convenient time to see her boyfriends and or pass her scheming notes. On or about October 1st, 2021, the defendant filed a grievance against Hillcrest in the medical department because the inmate was not properly restrained in the medical department. The defendant stated that Hillcrest was being rude to the defendant for no reason. The defendant was observed on a prior occasion being combative and aggressive with nurse Karen Ashley. The medical staff has repeatedly asked the security staff to make sure the defendant is handcuffed in the back for their safety. This makes the defendant furious. This is actually scary. Even the medical professionals are like, no thanks. The defendant would put in sick calls at certain times to avoid medical staff and to meet up or pass by one of her jailhouse romantic interests on the way to the medical department. The defendant would report bogus medical conditions to the degree that she would be hospitalized. On one occasion, the defendant complained to April, knew the sick calls. Complained to April that nobody picked up the sick calls. April told the defendant that April knew the sick calls had been picked up because April did it herself. The defendant made statements to Jessica and other medical staff, quote, "Don't you know what I am here for? And let me go in that cell and I'll handle it," which were perceived by the listeners to be statements threatening violence of some kind. Wow. She was saying, "Don't you know what I'm in here for?" She nasty. Yeah, maybe don't cut a baby out of someone. Right, Jules? The state of Texas hereby gives notice of intent to introduce each and every statement made by the defendant. Okay. The state of Texas further gives notice of intent to introduce the defendant's statements made to jail staff, medical staff, and other inmates. On or about October 15th, 2020, the defendant was being interviewed by Marcia for Community Health Corps Crisis Assessment. Marcia, who goes by Marcia Mole, asked Parker for her reason for coming to mental health today, and Parker responded, "I murdered a lady." Dude, psycho. And her name is not Lady, her name is Reagan. The defendant also reported one previous unaliving attempt in 2015 after she was paralyzed. Unaliving herself in 2015 after she was paralyzed. She describes herself as good. The last 6 months have been a struggle. Parker said she was married from 2012 to 2017. She added that her first husband made a decision for me to have a hysterectomy at age 21. We do know that Tommy and her mother, I don't know how much her mother was involved, but from some stuff I read, like her mother helped make that decision, but I don't know if at the end of the day it was just Tommy who was her husband at the time. She said she remarried in 2018 for a few months, then divorced. She said that he spread rumors about me so bad, I moved from New Boston to Sims. Parker added, quote, he left, had an affair, his girlfriend was pregnant. I got really depressed, isolated. My mom helped me through it. The defendant reports poor appetite for the past 5 weeks, hasn't eaten much, can't decide what to eat, nothing tastes good, pukes after eating, lost from 198 to 178 in past 3 weeks. She reports decrease in her sleep for the past 5 weeks, frequent wakening, 2 to 3 hours slash nightmares, cold sweats, wake up in a panic, wake up crying for the last 4 weeks. Report pinching self and bruising arms and legs from 2016 to 2018 without prompting. I would like to know more about this. She was self harming. I don't remember hearing that in the documentary. Taylor reported staying awake for days at a time, been doing it for years, having blackouts. First husband was abusive, would be in the kitchen, then in the shower for no reason. So it looks like the first husband was abusive. What was the first husband? Was that Tommy? No, the first husband, it was Donald Tommy Hunter Wade. Hmm. Interesting. Donald, do you have something to say, Donald? We would like to hear from you. She could be lying. This lady is loco. On or about November 10th, 2020, the defendant ends up going to the ER at Wadley Hospital and gives a rundown of her medical history that is mostly a total fabrication. She reports a history of a stroke, which didn't happen. And factor 5 Leiden disorder, she does not have this. On or about November 15th, 2020, the defendant reported she was vomiting and her head was hurting. The records note physical therapy evaluated her in my presence. Patient was taking very slow steps and acting like she was unsteady. However, physical therapist expert opinion is that at least part of her mobility was exaggerated. It is impossible to get an accurate exam on a patient due to her cooperation. Lab imaging reviewed during hospitalization, CT head, MRI brain, carotid US are all benign. On or about March 20th, 2021, the defendant reports to her mother about her recent hospital visit. The defendant reports that the nurse came in and told the defendant that the doctor refused to admit the defendant to the hospital because of her crime. On or about March 22nd, 2021, the defendant said she had gone back to the hospital on March 21st, 2021. According to the defendant, the hospital gave her IVs and electrolytes and it helped her feel 100% better. Later, on or about March 23rd, 2021, in a jail call to Lana, the defendant reported that she had been diagnosed with congestive heart failure. Wow. She's a hypochondriac. I mean, this is what she was doing out when she was free. On or about March 30th, 2021, the defendant wrote out a sick call request form. On the reason for the request, portion of the form she wrote continued migraine, lobe area stroke location, moderate pain, requesting BP check daily to see if that's the issue. The defendant never suffered a stroke. On or about March 31st, 2021, the defendant told mental health provider Maya, I don't know why I'm here. I don't have issues. I've never been on meds or anything. I don't want anything for mental health. The additional assessment notes mention that patient did not discuss much or long. She reported she has no mental health issues. On or about April 23rd, 2021, the defendant tells Lana that because of her new heart medication, she can't have red dye. For example, the dye that would be found in Dr. Pepper. She also tells Lana that she almost made medical have a stroke about her health situation. On or about April 24th, 2021, the defendant is on the phone with her mother, giving her new commissary orders, and she orders Red Island Punch. She wants sympathy, it sounds like. Well, in the last live we did about this case, like the medical professional did a really good job in explaining like the psychotic traits, and it actually aligns with what is here. So I'm glad like we went from that one to this one because it's like it was talking about how she can't basically stop herself because of like her traits, but I also think she's purely evil and wants attention. And to be honest, like she probably knows she ain't getting out and the death penalty, so she probably don't give a shit either, you know? On or about May 9th, 2021, the defendant wrote out wait, did I just read that? Oh, no, this is a different one. On or about May 9th, 2021, the defendant wrote out a sick call request. On the form, she wrote that she had red, like, swollen area the attorney wanted looked at last night due to factor 5 closing disorder. The defendant repeats the bogus medical report on or about November 20th, 2021. She puts in a sick call and claims pain and swelling in right leg where blood clot with factor 5 history of clots. The defendant does not have a clotting disorder due to a factor V Leiden mutation. The defendant has been telling this lie for years. So she has been tested for this mutation on multiple occasions, and each time the testing reveals a negative result. She mentions her attorney because she is constantly threatening to everyone at the jail with legal action if they do not do what she wants them to do when she wants them to do it. On or about June 12th, 2021, the defendant filed a waiver of treatment slash evaluation and tells the medical department that she wants to stop taking certain medications because her family can't afford the meds anymore. The defendant's family provides almost unlimited commissary, unlimited jail phone calls, and routinely sends the defendant books and other packages. The defendant and her mother talked on May 9th, 2022, on a jail call about how her mother had sent over 100 books to the defendant since the defendant has been in jail. Hmm. She definitely had Munchausen. She is not DAD. Oh, yeah, I forget about Munchausen, like Gypsy Rose. Whichever parents taught her that feigning illnesses would get her attention. That's the thing. And her mom seems to be very supportive, which I guess probably anyone would be with their child, but I'd be curious to listen to those jail calls. On or about June 15th, 2021, the defendant wrote a sick call request form. On the reason, she put chest pain, more in left shoulder with heart flutter. Have been weak most of the day, sleeping, no energy. In the patient note, the provided noted that her vital signs were stable and that the patient was laughing and talking with other inmates. No no signs of distress noted at the time. The defendant is discontinuing these medications because the medical bills are interfering with the defendant's ability to order commissary from the defendant's inmate account. A portion of the money that her mother is putting in Taylor's account is being garnished to pay medical bills. On or about June 9th, 2021, the defendant and her mother are discussing all of this, and the defendant tells her mother about a conversation she supposedly had with Sean about discontinuing the medication. They further discussed commissary issues and they believe Taylor is being treated unfairly. The defendant says, "If I have to chew Jeff's ass every time he comes up here, I will. I have no problem doing that. I'm done caring about ruffling feathers. I've ruffled enough right now that they know don't fuck with me up here right now." And she doesn't want to be on meds. On or about June 19th, 2021, the defendant wrote out another sick call request form. This time she wrote, "I am wanting to return to seeing and talking to mental health counselor twice weekly per my inmate rights with my penalties from Texas Jail Commission." Later on June 21st, 2021, the defendant writes another request. This time, she says, requesting to see my mental health counselor weekly to talk informed my attorney with penalty of charge weekly. Counseling is available in Texas jail while awaiting trial. On or about June 21st, 2021, she wrote another sick call request form. She she writes she had a urinary tract infection and claimed burning when urinates. The medical staff processed the sick call, and when they went to provide treatment, the defendant refused the sick call. The medical response portion of the form states refuse. The reason for refusal was that the defendant refused to go to the medical department. This is just one example of the defendant putting in a sick call and then refusing treatment. The state of Texas hereby gives notice of intent to put on evidence of the defendant's continuing pattern of putting in sick calls and then refusing or canceling them for various reasons. For example, to avoid certain providers or the transport to the medical department was at the time where the defendant could not meet up with her latest jailhouse romantic interest. Of course, she refused it, right? On June 22nd, 2021, the defendant saw Maya, a mental health provider, in the jail. The notes from the visit reflect, quote, patient has never had mental health treatment before. Patient does not feel the S word, unaliving herself. No hallucinations noted. Patient reports she would diagnose herself with depression and rates it at a 10. End quote. The defendant also discussed her family history. Patient has two children. Emerson is a 10-year-old and Trey is 7 years old. Patient has her children at all times. The defendant also notes domestic violence and essay. Essay by who? This is interesting. I have so many questions. Me too. Under provision DMS5 diagnosis, it notes patient reports depression. The defendant did not have both of her children full time before her incarceration. She did not have legal custody of her son and did not consistently exercise her visitation rights. The defendant has made claims that former husbands and boyfriends have abused her for years. The defendant's claim of SA came to light after she was arrested for 2 counts of capital murder and kidnapping. So they don't believe it. Wow. On or about June 22nd, 2021, Nurse Karen was actually talking with the defendant about some of the defendant's medical records not matching up with the facts reported by the defendant. For example, the defendant was reporting that she received specific treatment from specific providers, and the jail medical staff unable to confirm the defendant's medical history. When asked about the missing records, the defendant said from what she heard was that the DA had plenty of her medical records you could get. The defendant then added that she didn't have to give the jail medical department all of her records. When the nurse explained that it was important for the staff to have her complete medical history to properly treat her, the defendant said, well, I don't know what to tell you then. When the defendant is confronted about her lies or fabrications, she becomes combative and disrespectful. On or about July 16, 2021, a history and physical interview was had at the jail involving the defendant and a nurse, Karen. Several things were discussed, including the status of the defendant's tuberculosis testing. The notes indicate patient has not had a TB skin test. Paperwork says she did. Under history of chronic illness, the defendant had a lot to say. Most of it was completely fabricated. The defendant stated that she had a stroke in 2015 and was at Mother Francis in Tyler with right hemiparesis. She also said she took her first 8 steps months after the stroke. She also reported she was in the hospital for 41 days. She also noted that she had a hysterectomy and states she had cancer like material from endometriosis, but it was worse than endometriosis. She states that was diagnosed by TRMC by Melissa and Christopher. She says, I have only had 3 seizures since the stroke and diagnosed by Con at Mount Pleasant. States that she has a factor 5 clotting disorder. She adds, diagnosed by hematologist in Tyler after she had the stroke, states she had to saddle PEs at Wadley 2018. Back to the strokes, she says also states she was diagnosed with migraine right hemiparesis, states it was from the Tyler Neuro Group, and Dr. Khan was after her stroke and caused by her stroke. She says no color or peripheral vision in her right eye, and it was diagnosed by Dr. McHenry in Dallas, Texas, and states it was a neuro-ophthalmologist, went to Dallas 3 times a week for 6 months and back at a year in 2015. She further reports that her right shoulder, right hip, and right knee problems, with them dislocated due to the joints, would not hold after the stroke. Dr. Johnson, an orthopedic surgeon in TRMC, diagnosed with bursitis and was doing injections, and that was helping. She also states that in 2018, she was kicked by a cow in the hospital because she went to a concert in Little Rock and drank some beer and woke up in terrible pain and went to the ER and had a perforated bowel. So they did surgery, took appendix, some of the intestine where it was perforated, and her gallbladder. She reports that she did get addicted to pain medication after her stroke, to pain medication Stadolol, and Demerol due to migraines she had after stroke. The question was asked of her, have you ever been hospitalized for depression, a psychiatric episode, or any other mental health conditions? She answered, once after my stroke at Titus Regional for 24-hour observation after stroke, and had my mom living with us too. The question uh, was asked of her about mental health counselors and responded, used counselor during and after divorces and kept going because I really enjoyed my two counselors. The defendant also reported that she was a college graduate. That is a total fabrication. The defendant has a GED. The defendant reported that she's never taken medication for a mental health condition. The defendant was asked if she could possibly have an STD. The defendant responded, oh my God, if I have an STD, I'm going to be a murderer. The defendant did not report that she had MS. I can't. The cow, I know. What the hell is that about? In the hospital? Yeah, what was a cow doing in the hospital? That's actually funny. Wait, OMG was kicked by a cow to the concert is a effing song. No way. I didn't know that. That's absolutely wild. On or about July 21st, 2020, the defendant was reporting bogus medical concerns to providers in an attempt to change the lighting in the area of the jail in which she was housed. The defendant reported that it had been recommended that the defendant sleep with the lights off because of her seizures and migraines. The medical staff at the jail reviewed the defendant's medical records and found no such notion by her medical care providers. Karen, the nurse, looked into the matter for the jail and determined that the defendant lodged the complaint to a telemedicine provider, but that the defendant's medical records could not confirm the defendant's claims. This was an obvious attempt by the defendant to fake a medical condition in order to get her way. The defendant has repeatedly and continuously engaged in this behavior for years. The defendant also makes legal threats about her custody level. On or about October 8th, 2021, the defendant puts in a Bowie County jail request and refers to her legal representative and attempts to sound like she knows what she is talking about, citing the Texas administration legal system. The defendant says she has a right to refuse private custody. On or about July 16th, 2021, through or on or about July 25th, 2020, July 25th, 2021, the defendant starts reporting falls at the jail. One story is that she fell when she was mopping. Another time, she fell in her jail cell, and another time, she fell while she was showering or leaving the shower. The defendant claimed that a finger and or fingers were injured and demanding to go to the emergency room for medical treatment. The providers at Wadley noted that nothing was wrong with the defendant's finger and sent her back to jail. The defendant sent out repeated sick call requests about her finger after returning from the hospital. When the defendant got back from the emergency room, she continued to complain about her injured finger. When the jail medical staff told the defendant she had been examined by the doctor at the hospital and cleared, she became angry and started screaming at the nurse and making threats. On this instance, the yelling at the nurse was overheard by Miss Debbie Hall from the mail room. She That mental health professional said that this is like what she does too. Like she makes up these stories and then believes it. Yeah, this one for sure deserves to be on death row. She has made up like every illness in the world. She says that she has like everything. And it's interesting how literally the Netflix documentary did really leave out a lot of these facts. Um On or about August 20th, 2021, the defendant reports to Makisha, a mental health provider at the jail, that her prayer is that the victim's family knows how she really is and that she wouldn't do something like this. She feels it might be best to consider a plea as an option. She stated that she hates the people who are involved in this. She talked about her children and how she doesn't want them to see her in jail. On or about March 22nd, 2021, the defendant wrote a jail letter to her son Trey and told him, "Maybe daddy can let you come see me soon, but I know you are super busy." The defendant is aware that her former husband Tommy does not want his son to go to the Bowie County Jail and be exposed to that environment. However, the defendant wrote this in a letter to her 7-year-old child anyway. The defendant wrote to Trey on his birthday and said, "Sorry, I can't be there." The defendant writes another letter, "I sure miss your handsome face and sweet giggles with mama." The defendant ends the letter with, "Talk to you soon." The defendant is also aware that Tommy does not want his son speaking to the defendant on jail phone calls. The defendant has a history of saying hurtful things to Trey and upsetting him if she does not get her way. Okay, at this point, like, yeah, you need to leave the kid alone. That's so sad. Wow. He's already gonna have to live with the fact you're his mother and you're still not even letting him heal through the trauma right now. Yeah, we need to hear from the cow. On or about April 22nd, 2022, the defendant reports to the mental health provider at the jail that the defendant is now hearing voices. The defendant reports that the voices really bother her when she's trying to do her yoga or read books. The defendant also stated that she argues with the voices throughout the day. On or about April 26, 2022, an appointment description was added to the defendant's medical records concerning her recent revelation that she hears voices. I can't. Dr. Lewis notes patient was admitted in October of 2020 and has been fine with no issues. However, recently I am informed that the patient has began hearing voices. On or about May 10th, 2022, the defendant adds to her story and tells Dr. Lewis about hearing voices and claims that she has been previously treated for the condition. The defendant claims she started taking medication for hearing voices when she was 11 years old, but discontinued taking the medication. Okay, so that's a lie right there. The previous provider, remember, she said, "I've never been on mental health medications." This is interesting. I would be curious if we can find out more about like her past and her childhood because it seems like this started at a very young age. And I would just be curious if the essay is true, if this is true that, she was taking medications because I kind of believe it, the medication part at least. The defendant, like, I don't oh, that's a good question, Nini. I don't know. I haven't, Jules, but maybe we could do that on a members only. She didn't give two shits about her kids. Dude, no, she didn't. She gave the one with Tommy up. I think, like, she didn't even care about custody or anything. The defendant claims she started hearing voices, okay, at 11 years old. The defendant now claims the voices have become worse since she has been in jail. The defendant continues to maintain that she is hearing voices as recently as of May 2022. Again, to the mental health provider. The defendant reported on March 21st, 2021 and July 16th, 2021 that she has never been medicated for a mental health condition. Okay, well, you just lied. The defendant reported on June 22nd, 2021 that she has never received medical treatment for mental health condition. The defendant has a lengthy history of fabricating bogus medical conditions for various reasons. In this instance, the state of Texas believes the defendant is again malingering. The state of Texas hereby gives notice of intent to produce the evidence of medical and mental health records. Okay, so this says introduce jail emails or jail calls. Okay. The defendant has continuously and repeatedly threatened jail staff with bogus grievances and lawsuits since her incarceration at the Bowie County Jail on or about October 14th, 2020. She will tell the correctional officers that she's going to contact her lawyer and sue them individually and take everything that they have. The defendant repeatedly and continuously tells the jail staff that she will get her high paid lawyers to come up there whenever she calls. The defendant tells the staff that they will drag everyone through court. She also tells them that she will file a grievance on the officers if they don't do exactly what they want her to do. On one occasion, the defendant grabbed the receiver on a jail phone and pretended like she was calling her attorney on the phone and listing off the names of the correctional officers she was going to sue. The defendant will scream and yell at the jail staff if they do not do what she wants them to do at the time she wants them to do it. If a correctional officer does not do what the defendant wants, she will also retaliate against that officer and or make up stories about that officer. For example, the grievance the defendant filed on CO Amber, see below. Oh, okay. The Bowie County Jail has had to change policy and procedure due to her behavior. The defendant's route from her cell to medical was changed because the defendant was putting in sick calls to arrange meetings with her jailhouse boyfriends. The defendant will put in sick calls at certain times to try to avoid certain medical care workers, so the policy had to be changed on how the medical staff handled that. The medical staff also changed policy of how they picked sick calls. Medical now sends 2 nurses instead of 1 nurse to pick up sick calls because of the defendant's bogus complaints. This is ridiculous. On or about June 18th, 2021, the defendant wrote inmate residence grievance form describing a fabricated incident involving CO Amber. And Amber refused a request from Parker. Parker writes, I was threatened by Officer Amber Monk. Not directly. She made the comment, I'd cut the white bitch's throat. Wow. She was relieving Officer Nix from sitting with Tamia on S Watch. I immediately requested Sergeant or Lieutenant to our pod from our zone, Officer Nichols. I asked Lieutenant Carey to call my attorney, which she denied me after a verbal threat. All staff has been professional and respectful. Never have I been threatened. I am a PC inmate. The fact a lieutenant was okay to allow me to be threatened and deny legal representation. I will be contacting my attorney on this matter. The correctional officers involved, including Samantha and Amber, gave witness statements, and no such threat ever occurred. The defendant made up stories about Samantha on more than one occasion because Samantha was on the shit crew that did not give the defendant special treatment. The defendant would make up stories about being victimized in jail. The defendant told Shauna and several others that she had been attacked by Samantha. Attacked by Samantha, and that Samantha hit the defendant in the stomach so there wouldn't be bruising. The defendant hated and would make up stories about anyone she hated or did something she didn't like. The defendant would tell inmates lies about correctional officers and their criminal cases. The defendant told Shauna that CO Samantha was mad at Shauna and got with the district attorney and talked about Shauna's case to mess things up for Shauna. The defendant told Yeager she overheard Samantha talking about Shauna's case in the hallway. The defendant told Shauna and everyone else at the jail that her family was paying for high-powered attorneys. The defendant told Shauna that the defendant's attorneys would help Shauna with her criminal case. She is such a liar and shady person. All All whose are these boyfriends wanting to converse with her? I truly and I don't mean to, like, put Wade on the shit list or anything, but, like, dude, come on. It wasn't just about you not seeing her naked for 10 months, like, I think there was a lot more that was happening and he's seen and was aware of, like, I don't think she was acting normal at home, like, come on, dude. She can't even act normal for 1 day here. On one occasion, correctional officer Christina overheard Taylor become irate and scream and yell because the correction staff would not allow Taylor to do her recreation time when she wanted to do it. The defendant was yelling and screaming and calling the correctional officers names. The defendant said, "If that black bee comes back here, I'll scalp her head." I'm horrified. The defendant has said statement like these bees don't know me and they just don't know anything. Wow. Correctional officers Malone and Keaton and others have overheard the defendant threaten to sue everyone and make threats like, they don't know me, or they don't know what I can do, or they don't know what I'm capable of. Keaton has overheard the defendant say, they better not have come back in here, and a trustee made the defendant angry. The defendant becomes angry, screams, and yells when things don't go her way. The defendant has stated that she's going home after the trial or she's getting life in prison. The defendant told another CO that she won't sign a plea deal for more than 30 years. That's the maximum penalty she will agree to. Another version is that the defendant believes she's going to Bowie County Women's Center. The defendant does not believe she will get the death penalty. On or about May 2022, the defendant stated at the jail that she was having her mother, Shauna, take some of her property the defendant had accumulated at the jail to her house because the defendant was not going to be convicted of capital murder and she was going to go home after the trial. She is like straight up delusional. Going home. Yes, Calissa Katz. That's what I heard. That's the one I think maybe that's the one I was watching. Begged her son's father to take custody, but he refused. She didn't want her at the cabin with her and Wade. Her anger doesn't shock me. You're right, Lindsay. I just can't believe all of these things. The defendant told Shauna a couple of different versions of events about the crime. The defendant first said that she was over at Reagan's house sleeping on the morning of the crime. The defendant acted like she was over at Reagan's all the time and it was not uncommon for her to visit. The defendant heard some commotion and went to another area of the house to find that Reagan had been attacked. The defendant told Shauna, the defendant told Shauna, according to the defendant, Reagan knew that Reagan was dying and Reagan begged the defendant to cut her baby out in order to save the baby. The individual or individuals who attacked Reagan had already left the house when the defendant found Reagan. The defendant said she started cutting with a steak knife and then went to a kit with a scalpel to finish cutting out the baby. Oh my gosh. This is so horrible. When the defendant cut the baby out, she held the baby to Reagan's face and said, "Tell your mama bye." Later, the defendant's story evolved and she claimed that she had nothing to do with the crime. The defendant told Shauna that there was evidence that the defendant wasn't responsible for the crime, but the district attorney's office was getting rid of it. The defendant never mentioned the identity of who she believed was responsible for the crime. The defendant she was faking pregnant and she was going to go to Oklahoma and fake a miscarriage. The defendant was going to have someone call her boyfriend Wade and tell him she had a miscarriage, but at the last minute, someone decided they didn't want to make the call to Wade. The defendant told Shauna that Wade believed the defendant was pregnant. The defendant told Shauna that when the defendant was pulled over by DPS and first responders were attending to her, they noticed that the baby's cord was really close to the defendant, and the first responders mistakenly formed the opinion that the defendant had the baby because of the placement of the umbilical cord. It's disgusting. She put it in her pants, if you know what I mean. This is The defendant formed a jailhouse romantic relationship with another inmate, Lana. The defendant told Lana various stories involving the circumstances surrounding the murders, all of which were completely fabricated. The defendant also exchanged letters with Lana, both inside the jail and out after Addison was released. After Lana was released. The defendant told Lana that Wade believed the defendant was pregnant because Wade is a effing dumbass. The defendant told Lana she ordered a fake belly to wear. She would avoid intimacy with Wade by complaining of cramping or hurting. The OBGYN advised against sex because of her high risk pregnancy. The defendant also told Lana that she would let Wade feel her stomach and try to convince him that the baby was moving. The defendant told Lana that she had to fake being pregnant because she loved Wade and wanted to keep him. The defendant explained that Wade was trying to leave her and break things off, so she faked being pregnant. The defendant had Wade come up with the baby name together and had a gender reveal party. While the defendant was in jail with Lana, the defendant claimed she had a jail call with her mother, Shauna, and Wade was over at Shauna's house visiting Taylor's children and would not get on the call with the defendant. The defendant acted furious when she got off the phone about Wade's behavior. None of this is true. The defendant also told Lana that the defendant had custody of both of the defendant's children. The defendant said her routine was to get up at 4 a.m. to farm chores, then go to work all day, come home, prepare dinner for everyone, and then she would sit with the children until their bedtime at 9 p.m. The defendant said that's what a good mother did. The defendant said that she had full custody of both of her children before her arrest. That's a lie. The defendant also said that her son's father was trying to take advantage of the situation and get custody of the son and terminate the defendant's rights. I can't believe what a liar she is. Like, she was the one who didn't even show up to I think, the court hearing. So they granted him full custody. The defendant also told Lana that her son did not know his father like that, and she was concerned that her son's father was a stranger to her son. She was worried that it was going to be detrimental to her son. The defendant said after she was arrested that her family and children were being harassed and threatened. On or about March 29th, 2021, the defendant told Lana a story on a jail call about an unknown individual approaching Emerson at after school daycare and told Emerson, "You're pretty as your mom," and they would be seeing Emerson around. The defendant also told Lana that her mother, Shauna, had several break ins after the defendant was arrested. The defendant was very upset because people were breaking into her mother's house despite the security measures in place. The people breaking into Shauna's were out to get the defendant or get to her children. The defendant also told Lana versions of the new Boston Bandit story, wherein the defendant was made to participate in the murder of Reagan. The defendant fabricated an outrageous set of facts involving Kodiak, J Dog, Fat Boy, some girl with purple hair, and possibly a black female. The defendant told Lana that on the day of the crime, the defendant was going to Walmart when Wade called her and told her to go back up to their house to put the dog up. On her way back to the house, the defendant was stopped by the bandits, either rugged or hit, and then knocked out. The defendant told Lana that she was in and out of consciousness and woke up at Reagan's house. The gang had beat and stabbed Reagan, and the defendant only cut the baby out because Reagan was dying and begged the defendant to do it. Another version was that the defendant couldn't bring herself to cut the baby out, so she placed the weapon by Reagan's stomach, and Reagan pushed the knife in and pulled it across her own stomach. The defendant told Lana that the defendant carried a medical kit of sorts that she had purchased for the care of the defendant's animals. The defendant said she routinely performed C-sections on cattle. The defendant also told Lana that a blue baby foot fell out of Reagan's stomach. After the baby was removed, the defendant held up the baby to Reagan and said, "Look, it's a beautiful baby girl." Then the defendant said Reagan smiled big, sighed, and then died. The defendant told Lana that at least Reagan got to see her. The defendant said she took the baby to the couch and attempted to do CPR. The baby was not breathing, and the defendant could not locate a cellular phone to call for help. This is so bad. I feel like my heart breaks for Reagan and the baby. Oh my God. During the murder, Kinley walked in the room and the defendant yelled at Kinley to go back to her room. Oh my gosh, that's Reagan's little girl that was in the house when this happened. Poor little girl. I don't know if she saw anything. I'm assuming she could probably hear. The defendant said she knew Reagan was dead anyways and thought it would take longer to call 911. The defendant said that wasn't sure if her phone was in her car until she was driving down the road. The defendant was trying to call 911, do CPR, drive the car, and take off the murder clothes all while driving down the road after the crimes. The defendant decided to drive to the closest hospital that was only 6 miles away. The defendant told Lana that the motive for the attack on Reagan and Taylor was financially related. The story was that Taylor Parker owed a large sum of money to rug dealers for purchasing Dilaudid, which is hydromorphone, which is a controlled substance, prescriptions. According to the defendant, Reagan also owed money for purchasing those same substances from same dealers. Parker's story was that one night before the Schmurders, she and Reagan were discussing making payment to the rug dealer while standing in Reagan's driveway. The defendant and Reagan planned for Taylor Parker to come over the following day with $20,000 in cash, in which the defendant kept in a safe at the home that she shared with Wade. The defendant said they realized that the defendant and Reagan were being spied on by individuals who lived across the street. When Lana asked the defendant why the dealers were continuing to supply the defendant with substances when she owed that kind of money, the defendant replied, I have credit. The defendant later said the individuals across the street matched the description of the defendant's kidnappers. Later in the defendant's letters to Lana, the defendant indicates that the defendant's lying about the defendant's finances is what got Reagan killed. The story later changed after the defendant decided she also hated Wade. To include Wade orchestrated the kidnapping and assault of Taylor Parker because he did not want the defendant or their baby. In one of the letters written by the defendants to Lana, the defendant said that Wade wanted her dead because of money that he would inherit from her grandparents' timber and or oil and gas money. The defendant also told Lana that she did not initially tell the police about what had happened because she did not want the police to go back to Reagan's house because it looked like the defendant committed the crimes. Lana would question the defendant about some of the details of the story that didn't make sense, and the defendant would come up with explanations to try and explain the evidence. The defendant also told Lana that the defendant had thrown the clothes out of the window after the defendant left Reagan's house. Lana is also aware of and can testify to the details of the defendant's sophisticated jailhouse scheme to frame other individuals, such as Hannah and Shauna. The defendant also told Lana that she was arrested in Idabel, Oklahoma, and she was beaten and deprived of food and water for 6 days. The defendant, when she was extradited to Texas and arrived at Bowie County Jail, she was taken into the shower area and assaulted by COs. One of them was Officer Malone, who punched the defendant in the stomach and demanded the defendant turn over a phone. The defendant said she had to turn over the phone. The defendant also told Lana that the defendant's mother brought Pizza Hut at the jail and a jailer snuck the pizza in at midnight. The defendant said she ate the entire pizza by herself. Wow. I cannot believe the amount of lies and bullshit this Taylor psycho is spewing and doing. The defendant also told Lana more bogus information about the defendant's medical history. She told Lana that she was taking diet pills, drinking energy drinks, and taking Dilaudid, and it caused her to have a stroke. The defendant told Lana that she had MS and COPD. The defendant told Lana that she had the oxygen for COPD and that the defendant was able to have oxygen at the jail because they gave her a big cell. When Lana asked the defendant to explain something that doesn't make any sense, the defendants will stare off and not talk. Then the defendant will snap out of it and come back to the conversation. The defendant told Lana that she has a condition. Lana also confided in the defendant that Lana was essayed by a family member when she was young. The defendant told Lana that she knew how Lana felt because her dad used to come in on her at night. Oh, wow. So Taylor's claiming that her father essayed her. These are wild. Wild accusations, and I don't know. Sometimes I think like maybe it can be true, but then I'm like maybe not, you know? I'd hate to be like she's a liar about essay, but like we actually don't know. But we know she's a damn liar. The defendant said this is why she had a low self-esteem. The defendant told Addison that she didn't want to talk about the details, but the same things that happened to Lana had happened to the defendant. The defendant will listen to other stories of physical and essay and adopt those stories of her own. Okay, so they're pretty sure it's she's just lying and making up shit. Yeah, some exactly. Sorry, probably BS. The defendant wrote numerous letters to Lana about numerous topics, some related to the criminal case and some are not. The defendant lectures Lana on abusing prescriptions and even lectures Lana on how to properly care for her children. The defendant acts like she cares deeply for Lana and only wants Lana to change her ways because the defendant wants what is best for Lana and her children. The defendant also writes letters to her grandmother and her aunt Marilyn that contain bogus or fabricated information. The state gives notice of intent to introduce the defendant's jail letters. Excerpts from the letters the defendant to Lana are reproduced in this notice. However, the state of Texas gives notice of intent to introduce the complete versions of each one. The defendant writes to Lana about how the defendant regrets telling lies about having money. The defendant and her family do not have significant amounts. Sorry, I needed to get a drink. Um, The defendant and her family do not have significant amount of money, but the defendant tells wild tales about how her family was fabulously wealthy and how they obtained the wealth. In one of the fabricated stories involving the new Boston gang of bandits, the defendant was targeted for rugging and kidnapping because the defendant was known to have large amounts of money. The defendant says, "My money lie got my friend killed, and no matter what, I'll wear the scar on my heart forever." Another quote, "Immediately after the monsters dies the heroes." Robert Colasso. "I don't want to be a hero because I wasn't that day." Reagan refused to show the SOBs any weakness. "As I begged, pleaded, cried, and screamed, she told me to say nothing. I will never unsee the worst day of my life, Lana." Absolutely none of this is true except for the defendant tells wild lies about being wealthy when she is not. All the stories she makes up about Reagan disgust me. In a letter dated April 2nd, 2021, the defendant is lecturing Lana on how Lana needs to stop abusing prescription medication. The defendant writes, "What in the hell is it going to take, huh? Tell me, please. Losing your children? Unaliving someone under the influence of med RX abuse? Get a grip." Later in the letter, Taylor says, "I asked you to help me. I gave you a part. They were right. People you trust to help you will always fail you, let you down. I needed you and you hurt me." Taylor adds, "This is what happens when someone truly loves you. There are consequences to your actions." On another occasion, the defendant writes to Lana, "I won't watch anyone else die at my hands." The defendant continues her pattern of reminding Lana that the defendant needs Lana to help her. The defendant writes, "I know you are busy with life and freedom. Don't forget about me. Keep in mind what we talked about. Remember, court is April 9th at 9:45 a.m. to 10, I believe. Come, I'll see if Jeff can pull you back afterwards with us to talk." She ends the letter with PS, "I need you to do that. Be strong." The defendant writes in a separate letter, "If I tell you I will do something, you can take it to heart. I will never say I will and take it back. I can only pray if someone says they will do something. It's the truth." In another letter to Lana dated May 2021, the defendant gives Lana a medical update on a double ear infection that she claims to have been diagnosed with at the jail. The defendant is explaining the excruciating pain and how she has significant hearing loss. The defendant also claims to have heavy bleeding from her ear. The defendant also writes, "With court Friday for our 6-week bullshit, meet for the DA to show her ass and smile. Bless her heart. Prayers probably wouldn't cleanse her sins by no means." The defendant goes on to say that the books her family and her attorney have purchased for her are being held, and the judge has been made aware of the problems. The defendant closes the letter with a meaningful quote about loneliness and being forgotten. The defendant also writes in jail letter to her aunt Marilyn about an upcoming court date. The defendant says, "Prayers my way, please. Court is Friday at 1 p.m. for our 6-week check-in so the DA team can show out like fools." Not my own words, but much nicer than what I have to say. The defendant repeatedly writes jail letters out to her family that contain fabricated or exaggerated information. Hey, Adrian, good to see you, love. Morphine and dial plus mental. Has she ever told the truth? No, I don't think so. The defendant also told Christina that the defendant was writing a book about the murders, and defendant told Amber she was getting Netflix and movie deals. That is interesting. So this is, what did I say? 2022. The defendant told Keaton that Reagan was her best friend, and the defendant misses the times that her and Reagan would sit and talk. The defendant also said she hates that people could think the defendant could do something like that to her best friend. The defendant wanted Keaton to make a copy of her book, but Keaton told the defendant that the copy machine was broken at the jail. The defendant plays a victim in every scenario in jail. She is constantly telling the correctional officers they are treating her differently or discriminating against her. On or about October 1st, 2021, the defendant filed a grievance with the jail because she believed she didn't have a television to watch. The defendant wrote that she had right to not be discriminated against, and I feel this is the issue here. The defendant told the medical staff at one time that a doctor at the hospital refused to treat her because of her charges. The defendant also repeated the same story in a letter to Lana. She wrote, "The provider refused to treat me because of my crime. Said to stay in jail and die was better. That broke my heart." The defendant will fabricate injuries in jail and then get mad at the medical staff when they tell her nothing is wrong with her. On one occasion, the defendant reported that she tripped and fell on a spot in the floor after it was mopped, and the defendant believed she was injured. The defendant was sent to the hospital, and the x-ray showed there was nothing wrong with her. The defendant was transported back to the jail and then yelled that she was going to call her attorney. Several correctional officers have observed this type of behavior, including, a couple different officers. The defendant will rant and rave at the officers to intimidate, intimidate. I think they may intimidate them to get her way. The defendant told Amber, one of the officers, that she has a deal with Netflix about the murders. The defendant said that Netflix wanted to film the defendant while she was in Bowie County before the trial, but the sheriff's department wouldn't allow Netflix to film inside the jail. Wow. So the Netflix deal was already in the works, and they probably wanted her to interview her. This is fascinating, Melly. This is actually, yeah, you're right, ATS. I'm shook. Wow. Wow, wow, wow. Um, According to the BCSO, Netflix had made no such request. Oh, okay. That's kind of weird that she's like talking about it and she didn't know. And then they did make a Netflix documentary. The defendant stated that her documentary will end how the trial ends. The defendant also stated that Lifetime wants to do a movie about her and that Nancy Grace is trying to get an interview. Oh, is that true? Probably. Who knows? Maybe she's lying. The defendant also, I could see Nancy Grace doing that though. The defendant also maintains to the jail staff and other inmates that her family is wealthy and that they own ranches and get millions of dollars in oil and gas money. Other stories include that her family are wealthy hog farmers from Arkansas or owners of the Morton Salt Company. The defendant once told that her father won a multi-million-dollar lawsuit that set the family up for life. In a jail letter out, the defendant writes, quote, "I want my innocent side to come out. I am wrongly accused. We deserve to be heard, so I am doing a tell-all biography under a legal contract." Taylor goes on to explain that she's working with a private attorney to control the false information that is being spread about her. The defendant writes about wanting her story to get some publicity to a jailhouse girlfriend, Lana. The defendant spends much of the letter letting Lana have it because Lana has her freedom and no one cares about the defendant. The defendant wants Lana to contact a family member of Lana's who has connection with the Texas Prison Board and to get the defendant to a quote good prison. The defendant goes on to explain that she's going to a pretrial hearing on December 10th and that I'm going to mention to reinstate my bond under strict guidelines. House arrest monitor sitters at the house 24/7 to allow me home until trial. The defendant asks, could you call around for some high profile bondsmen willing to work with cash/collateral? Anything helps if you so want to, or contact Fox News or CNN. I'd like to give an all piece of my story. The defendant told Lana she wanted to give interviews and tell her story so that the defendant would get some money. The documentary is correct. The hospitals were on high alert. The only one spreading false info about her is her. The defendant maintains an extensive collection of books in her jail cell. The defendant frequently discusses her books about the crime and such with other inmates, medical staff, and correctional officers. The defendant keeps books about how to solve murders. The defendant has previously written short stories about her murder, has written jail letters offering her services to the FBI to assist them in solving the murders, and read books about them in jail. The state of Texas hereby gives notice of intent to introduce the defendant's short stories, each and every jail letter recovered from the defendant's jail cell, and testimony related to the defendant's continued possession of books about the crime. The defendant talks on jail email system about ordering books. For example, on March 18, 2022, the defendant sends her mother a list of books she wants. She wants her mom to send Red Queen series, From Blood and Ash series, House of Earth and Ash series. I'm interested in looking into those. Has anybody here read those? Chat and comments. Hi Alicia, good to see you, love. I want to read them now because of her. On April 16, 2022, the defendant requests Shadow Beast series, Supernatural Academy Year 1, and Secret Keepers House of Darken. Okay, this girl is like actually really needs to be in a mental hospital. Like, I think she deserves death penalty too, but like this girl has no, I can't even keep track anymore with all these lies and just this one document. The description of Shadow Beast reads, quote, if you like sexy, dark paranormal romances with humor, steam, action, a tough heroine and anti-hero, this book is for you. The defendant also uses the exchange of books to get her notes passed throughout the jail. The defendant also manipulates correctional officers into letting the defendant out of her cell. At times, she is not allowed to be out of her cell. The defendant will rant and rave and lash out at correctional officers if she's not able to get out of her cell when she wants to. The defendant routinely discusses this with her parents on the jail calls. The defendant wears makeup in the jail and to the medical department. The defendant also wears makeup to attorney visits and court appearances. The defendant also said Kelly in the medical department that the defendant would get sick at the sight of blood and might pass out. On or about October 8th, 2021, Taylor filled out a Bowie County inmate request. She's requesting information on whom to speak with regarding petitioning my private custody classification. After speaking with my legal representative, we will be petitioning with the Texas Jail Commission on my status. After multiple outside sources within the Texas administration legal system as the inmate, I have the right to refuse private custody. This is my second written request. My first request was never responded to by the warden. The state of Texas hereby gives notice of intent to use all of the records provided by Bowie County Jail that pertain to Taylor and her request, grievance, sick calls, commissary, trust account, and any other relevant information. On or about November and December 2021, the defendant had conversations with Shaitiva about what transpired during the crimes. The defendant told her that the defendant, her Taylor, was on rugs when the murders happened. The defendant said the victim's baby daddy or boyfriend planned it out and rugged the defendant. I think the rugs would have been in the documents, right? The toxicology. Do we know the results of those? I'm a little interested. I'm assuming since she was pregnant, they would have done that. Yeah? Or well, they thought she was pregnant. The victim's husband at the time of the crimes was Homer. Wait, the victim's husband at the time was Homer. Wait, Homer's not on my list. Did she just make up a husband? Am I missing something? Donald, Tommy, Hunter, Wade. Okay, let's see. The victim's husband at the time of the crimes was Homer. The defendant tells Stanley that she committed the crimes only because of the rugs. The defendant also asked, wait, who's Stanley? Oh, Shativa. The victim's husband at the time was Homer. The defendant tells Shativa that she committed the crimes only because of the rugs. The defendant also asked Shativa to move notes around the jail for the defendant. The defendant wants Shativa to pass the notes to Adam and Travis. The defendant said the defendant paid her in coffee to pass the notes, but she threw the notes in the trash and did not pass them. The defendant maintains her jail romances and formulates her plots using the jail notes passed around by various means. The defendant asked inmates and correctional officers to pass the notes. The defendant told Amber that which is a CO, the defendant's former boyfriend Wade was beating her and that Wade knew she wasn't pregnant because they would shower together and have sex. Um, so here she says that Wade knew she wasn't pregnant. Oh, Homer was one of them, so I missed him on my list? Oh, that's Reagan's. Oh, wait. I'm disgusted. Did I read that right? Oh, okay, the victim's husband. Oh, yeah, okay, it was Homer. Oh, I thought she was saying it was her husband. I was like, "That's disturbing." That's still disturbing. Okay, so Homer was Reagan's. Oh, man, that's sad. Okay, so here she said Wade knew she wasn't pregnant. So, hmm. The defendant blamed her conduct on Wade because he was so manipulative and beat her. The defendant also said, I am not taking the rap by myself. The defendant did not mention Wade or being abused to Shativa and did not mention Homer and or being rugged to Amber. The defendant did not mention her wild story about being kidnapped, rugged, and forced to participate in the plot with Kodiak, J Dog, Fat Boy, and the rest of the bandits to Stanley or Amber. The defendant also expressed sadness on the date of the anniversary of Reagan and Braxton's death. That's disturbing. The defendant was concerned for herself because people would be posting negative comments about the defendant on social media. The defendant has shown no remorse for the crimes and acts like she is a victim. Since her incarceration and before, the defendant has also made claims that her former husbands, Tommy and Hunter, have abused her. On or about December 23rd, 2021, the defendant writes in a letter to her prison boyfriend, Augustine, that her former boyfriend Wade was abusive. The defendant writes, I'm big on family. I lost that with Wade abusing me physically and mentally. He isolated me. He'd call me fat and tell me that no one would be attracted to me. Pinch my thighs or arms. It was horrible, but those are my mistakes to live with. The state of Texas gives notice of intent to introduce the defendant's phone calls. Okay, the calls would include okay, so there's a shit ton of phone calls when you get our hands on those. Um, several of actually, I believe I already did reach out to someone. Several of the listed dates have multiple calls made on the same date. The state gives notice to introduce each call. The defendant has been incarcerated in the Bowie County, Texas jail since her extradition from state of Oklahoma on or about October 14th, 2020. The defendant has access to an email kiosk in the jail phone system. The state of Texas, okay, gives to introduce that. On or about April 30th, 2022, while the defendant was incarcerated at the Bowie County, Texas jail, her social media Snapchat account was activated and reactivated under the username Tay Wakazi. That same account was used by the defendant prior to the murders and her incarceration. Since the time of her incarceration, the defendant has appeared at pretrial wearing a facial mask with sunflowers on it. The defendant will wear mask even on occasion when no one else is in the courtroom wearing a mask. The sunflower was Reagan Hancock's favorite flower, and members of the courtroom gallery are frequently wearing sunflower jewelry, clothing, etc., in the remembrance of Reagan and baby Braxton. The defendant has repeatedly and continuously worn a mask with sunflowers on it in front of Reagan's widower, Homer, and in front of Reagan's mother, Jessica. Whoa, that is so evil and disgusting. And I can't, yeah, nasty work. Listen, Taylor Parker is a psychopath. Okay, so certificate of service. What is this? Okay, we're done with that. Wow, wow, wow. That is disturbing, but that actually gives me a better understanding of things. So cruel. Yeah, it is. Okay, let's get to the video. It's not very long about the crime scene investigators talking about the scene. Let's watch this. I haven't watched this before, but I heard it's pretty intense. So let's check it out. Please make sure you guys do hit the like button and shout out to those of you that are here. She's asking to be physically assaulted, doing stuff like that. Just saying, I can't imagine what she's like in prison now. Okay, let's watch this.
Last time we talked, you both said that crime scene left an indelible mark with you both.
Yes.
You both have been doing it a very long time. So I want you to speak about that day and comb through what happened when the call came and then what you all did next. And it's open to you just to describe the call, what came next, and whatever you feel.
Okay. All right. I was in the office and Chief Deputy McCarver come in the office and asked if we was available to assist New Boston. They advised us New Boston just had a homicide. And I told him yes. And at the time it was me and one Arkansas crime scene guy that was working that day. So we started heading to Boston. And once I got to New Boston, got out to find out what was going on. And they told me it was a female that apparently they thought had been beaten to death. So as I'm there, they told me that she was pregnant. And I thought, okay, so she's pregnant. And then next question was, well, how's the baby? Is the baby going to be able to be delivered or what? And they went in there and they come back and said, well, the baby's gone. And so my remark was, the baby is gone as in deceased or is gone as in gone? And they said, no, the baby is gone. The baby is missing. And as soon as they told me that, I mean, your mind starts running. We got to contact hospitals. We got to get officers. It sounds horrible, but we got to get officers starting to look at dumpsters near around and things like that. You start playing 1,000 scenarios through your head. And I did my initial walk through and see what I saw. And at that point, I knew I was going to need help. So I called my partner, Spencer. He was off on some medical leave for his wife. And I told him what I had. And I said, you don't have to come out. I said, but we're going to be here for a while. And so he come out to assist me. And then we called the other Arkansas crime scene person out too. So now we got 4 crime scenes. You got 2 Arkansas and 2 Texas. it was such a big scene. We called Arkansas for assistance, and they come helped us with it. New Boston knew. Talked to the chief. He said, "Man," he said, "once we seen this, we knew it was over our head." And he said, "That's why your phone number's on our bulletin board." He said, "That's why we called y'all, because we don't mind assisting other agencies because we're the only dedicated crime scene unit in this area." So they called us, and we got there. And we started doing our initial walkthrough, and the first thing I noticed at the scene was a lot of bloody footprints, shoe impressions. And at that time, I told the responding officer, I want names, pictures, boot sizes of everybody that's been in the house, because I knew it may come down to shoe impression comparisons. At the time, we didn't know what we had. You're running the scenarios through your head, and you're thinking, well, boyfriend done it, husband found out that she was pregnant by somebody else, he done it. You just start running all kinds of scenarios. And I even told the guys whenever we had our meeting, I said, 3 things can happen. I said, either the husband's the suspect, or she has a boyfriend. I said, or just some random psycho come and done it. And unfortunately, it was the third choice out of that. And so we got there and took overall photographs at first. And then at the time I asked, do we have a search warrant to go into the house to do our thing? They said, no, we have consent. And I said, consent's not going to work in this situation, because to me, your number one suspects right now is the husband. Who gave you consent? Well, the husband did. Well, that's not going to work. And so then had to stop and wait for the search warrants. And that's whenever I called Spencer and said, look, it takes a couple hours to get a search warrant and things like that. And so I called Spencer, and he come up and helped me. And just going in, the shoe impressions, I got to looking at shoe impressions, and we determined there were 2 different style of shoe impressions. Okay. We had those 2. And as we were starting to do our thing, then word come out that a state trooper had stopped a woman in DeKalb and had delivered a baby and was going to Idabel. Well, we're thinking she's in DeKalb. Why wasn't she going to St. Michael's? Why wasn't she going to Mount Pleasant? Why Idabel? Mm-hmm. And it was a dispatcher that actually turned the detectives onto, say, hey, just a little while ago, we had a trooper said a woman delivered a baby on the side of the road. But they started checking into that. Come to find out, it was Parker that had the baby and was heading to Oklahoma. And the reason she was heading to Oklahoma is because she's already burned bridges in St. Michael's and Mount Pleasant. She couldn't use either one of the hospitals because she's had a hysterectomy or a partial hysterectomy, and she couldn't have any children. Mm-hmm. And so once we found out it was an abduction of the child, then you kind of start honing in on, okay, now what do we look for? It's an abduction of somebody that come in the house and took. You kind of start changing your mind and your theories a little bit about what's going on.
Plus, the husband was pretty much alibied out. He'd been at work the whole entire time during the homicide, so we knew he was out. Like we were saying, as soon as he called me and told me of the case, I did the same thing. We go through the scenarios. And I had already had the same 3 scenarios. The whole entire time I'm driving to Boston, I'm thinking, how many deputies and troopers can I pull to go start searching every roadway, dumpster in the area to try to find the child? Because typically it's either one of 2 things. Either they take the baby to take for themselves, or they're taking it to dispose of the baby. So we were going through that scenario. And like you said, I was actually medical leave with my wife, and she actually gave me a very mean look for actually agreeing to go to the case. But I knew the complexity of the case was going to be, it needed to be done.
So when we got the search warrants and everything, and we get inside the residence, you kind of just sit back and you kind of just you let the scene talk to you. And it kind of sounds corny, but it's blood tells you a lot of things. Okay. And so you sit back and you look, and we're looking at blood. There's blood everywhere. There was a bloody jar in the kitchen. There was a bloody
I don't get the bloody jar. Did she use that like for body parts or just to like she drained the blood into the jar?
A jar full of sand in the living room. There was.
What do you mean a bloody jar? There was so much blood that blood was overflowing into a jar,
No, it
or
was-
like
No.
Okay, yeah, it was mason jars.
okay,
And it was actually from their wedding. You know how you pour the sand into the mason jars for
Okay.
weddings?
okay,
One of them was empty and the other one had the sand in it. I believe the one in it was about 4 pounds, I think is what
I'd have to look at it
I
again.
can't
4 or
recall.
5 pounds worth of sand.
It was a
It's
heavy.
weight.
and when I say blood was on it, I'm talking blood transfer from like a hand onto it.
okay, gotcha.
Oh.
And looking
And
at
spatter.
her, yeah,
Okay.
and spatter and things like that, and looking at the blood on that, then it was like, well, she was beaten with one of these jars.
Oh, wow. She beat her with a jar and a hammer. Oh my gosh. And we know Reagan tried to save her baby and couldn't. Thank you, Spara. Excellent content, Melly. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Appreciate you. And thank you for being here. I'm gonna have nightmares.
We once we started looking at the body, she had an indentation on her head that we knew come from a jar, probably come from the jar with the sand in it because it's a heavier object. And when we first started looking, we had blood everywhere. So our first initial thought was this woman fought for her life. She fought this suspect, this person come in. She fought. That was our first hypothesis. But once we started the investigation and started looking at things, and once Taylor Park was arrested, she had no injuries on her. So that indicates to us her fingernails are broken. The victim's fingernails are broken and things like that. She was covering up. She was ambushed. She was hit. She's covering up the whole time, and she's being beaten with something. She's been beaten.
Oh my gosh. Reagan's nails were found in her placenta.
In the back of the head. She was fingers were broke. She's got bruising on her arms where she was just taking a beating, and she's covering up. Well, we got blood in the kitchen, and we got blood in the living room, and we got blood at the front door. And
So this is happening everywhere in the house. She's running away
Yes.
while she's
She's trying to escape the assault, and
she got assaulted right at the door at the kitchen
Yes.
in the garage door.
Yeah.
Whenever she was assaulted, I believe she was hit in the back of the head with an object, either a hammer or a crowbar. And it takes more than one hit to start blood spatter. The first hit lacerates the skin. So whenever she was hit, she starts bleeding. And we had blood on a refrigerator that was blood spatter from hair. You could tell it was from hair, where she went down, she got up, she tried to run out the front door, was attacked at the front door, brought back in the living room, and then she was brutally attacked there. Up against the wall, we had the blood spatter on the wall. You could pretty much, with the blood, look at everywhere she had been. And I'll never forget, we're sitting there, we're looking at it, and we weren't saying a word to each other. We're just looking because we're just trying to soak everything in because there's so much. And I looked at my partner and I said, she was alive when that baby was taken. And he says, I think you're right. And the reason we come to that conclusion was because of the blood and the absence of blood. We could tell by the blood spatter and the blood stains where she was at when the baby was fully removed. She was on her back when we got there.
Could you guys imagine Reagan's like fighting for her life and the baby's life, and then she's alive when her baby gets cut out of her? I can't even believe that.
And we knew she had been moved because of the blood. So one of our first questions is, who moved the body? Well, nobody knew who moved the body because it was such a traumatic thing. Nobody could remember. So we played video back, and it was the EMT, the paramedics that come in. He pulled her over to check for the baby, and you can see him. He looks and he stands up, and you can see the look on his face, and he looks back down, and that's when he sets back up and he goes, that baby's gone. So she was on her back, but she died on her stomach, and the blood the blood told us that. So that was an indication to us.
Wait, what?
So once that baby was pulled from her, which she fought for, as she was walking off, you could tell she was trying to go after her and then died on the floor.
And that's when I mentioned that this case had a profound impact on us. We're both parents. We could just imagine the terror she went through knowing she's dying and this person is taking her child. I couldn't imagine that. I mean, that everyone in our unit were parents. So that's what bugged us the most. And that what left a psychological impact on us was that knowing that.
She was like, I think, yeah, crawling to her baby. Oh my goodness. I can't even.
Fact. And knowing that she's alive during this.
The horror that she was going through during that whole altercation. Go ahead.
And we were plenty of murders where they fought for their lives or stuff like that. And they went through terror as well. But like I said, a new parent losing their child this way and not knowing what's going to happen to that child is unfathomable for us.
And she put up an effort. And the reason we know that she had struggled and tug of war with a baby is one of her broken fingernails. She had like press-on nails, and we found 3 at the house, and we were missing one. Well, that fingernail was found in the uterus of the child whenever they recovered the uterus. So she was pulling hard enough for her to lose a nail.
That's the part I can't. I just cannot.
So now we know we've got somebody in there, and we know from experience what we have got to do. We got to determine how many suspects. How many? Was it one person? Was it 2 people? Was it 3 people that come in here and done that? Well, looking at the scene, it was obvious to us with the blood and the things at the scene that it was just a single person. It was a single person that committed this crime. And the reason we can confidently say that is because at the scene, we had 2 different types of shoe impressions. Okay. So you're going to assume one is suspects, one is victims. Well, as we start doing these shoe impressions with this, I say shoe impressions, they're blood impressions of shoe prints, walking in blood, and they're transferring that blood all over the floor. Sure. And we only had 2 different types of shoes. Well, we found out that Taylor Parker, when she was arrested, was wearing a pair of Crocs. Those Crocs were shown to the victim's mother. The victim said, "Those are my daughter's Crocs." She said, "I bought those Crocs for her. Those are her." Those were there at the house. So
Taylor does all of this and then still takes her damn Crocs.
During all this altercation, Taylor Parker's wearing a pair of shoes, or sandals is what she was wearing because of the shoe impression. She was wearing sandals, and then after she got the baby and all that, and she left, she cleaned up, and she took the victim's shoes to put them on to leave. Mm-hmm. So the shoe prints that belonged to the victim was actually Taylor Parker walking around the house after she was deceased, walking through blood and cleaning up and things like that. We knew one was a Croc. The other one we didn't know, and we searched and searched and searched for the type of pattern that it was. And we knew it was a sandal. The reason we knew it was a sandal was because we have her on video at an Easy Mart right before the murders, and she was wearing a white pair of sandals. So we're focused on sandals, and we searched for days and days and days.
And when he means search, we're actually going to shoe stores all around town, actually taking sandals, looking at the bottom of it, and having a photo of the shoe impression going, no, that's not a match.
Going on the internet, looking at images on the internet. Does this pattern type match up? So that pattern got instilled in my brain. And so I was in Fort Smith visiting my grandbabies, and I was walking through the house, and I looked down, and there was a sandal. My daughter's sandals were sitting over by the couch. And so I looked at them, I thought, So I went over and I picked it up. And as soon as I picked it up, I said, that's the design. And I went in there, I said, where did you get these sandals? She goes, they're just sandals from Walmart. And so when I got back, I took pictures of it and I told him, I said, this is the brand of shoe. So we went to Walmart, and the year before is when they stopped that pattern on those sandals. So they were older sandals and the new ones didn't have that.
Right.
So what we did is I got online on eBay and found a pair of sandals that looked just like the ones that was in our Blade Shoe print. So once I bought those off of eBay, and when I got them, we brought them to work, and we called LifeShare out here.
The blood bank.
Yeah, the blood bank here in Texarkana. And we kind of told them, hey, well, we went by there. We didn't call them. We went by there and said, hey, look, do y'all have any old expired blood or anything like that? Because this is the reason. And we told them about the case, which they already knew about it. And we told them we're trying to replicate the shoe impression. And they said, we'll get in touch with you. So out of Shreveport, they called us from Shreveport. They said, we heard y'all needed some blood. And we told them, they said, we will help you 100%. We've got some old blood. She goes, it's tested blood. It's just expired. We can't give it to nobody. So they sent us a couple of pints of blood. And so we go into our lab, and now we start trying to replicate the shoe impressions. We went to Lowe's. We bought the same type of tile that was in the floor at Lowe's, and took it into our lab and set it down. We had our female partner from Arkansas side slip the sandals on, step in the blood, and walk, and we could replicate those same type of shoe patterns that was in that. So, and those type of sandals, they sell in white. Mm-hmm. So we finally got that down. So now we know it was to a croc in this sandal here. And it was, and if you look at the blood, we could tell that some of it, she had been walking around carrying something bloody, a towel, the baby or whatever, because you had blood drops on top of that. And we'll be able to show you some of that where it hit and to indicate that, yeah, she was walking around in these shoes carrying something that was bloody.
And I think in Taylor Parker's mind, she thought the assault would be like on TV. I hit her in the head once, she'll go down unconscious. I can do what I need to do and be done and out of here. She didn't realize it takes a lot more than that to knock somebody out effectively. And like he said, we originally thought it was a knockdown, drag out fight. Then come to find out it wasn't. There's still a lot of things that we never recovered. We never recovered Taylor's actual shoes.
We never recovered
the hammer or whatever.
Or crowbar, whatever
she used to beat on her. We never recovered that.
Cell phones.
So what the heck did she do with all of that? Threw it out on her way? Wasn't that far, was it? The hospital in Idabel? She obviously had to stop somewhere and dispose of the evidence.
Never found the cell phone. Never found the victim's cell phone. Never found
Taylor's.
One of they had some of Taylor's, but not one. Hers they didn't find. She had several different cell phones because she would text herself being somebody else, and that's what's amazing. And we brought up the husband earlier because that's going to be one of your first primary suspects. And one of the things that we had to battle in court is people couldn't believe that the husband didn't know about it. Mm-hmm. And like
Taylor's husband?
Yes.
Taylor's husband.
Okay,
Yeah.
Yes, officer. We have questions.
Taylor's the suspect's husband couldn't have known about it. They said, well, they would have had to know that she was pregnant. Well, people don't understand. She bought a prosthetic belly. She had a prosthetic belly. She had bought sonograms. She had bought all this stuff. And you can go online, fakeapregnancy.com, and you can buy everything you need to make somebody think that you're pregnant. And this guy thought she was pregnant. And she was texting herself because they have a hog farm and they sell hogs. She told her husband, look, I'm going to Idabel because they're going to do a C-section, take this baby. He said, well, I'm going with you. She said, well, you can. He says, well, why not? She said, remember, we've got to sell these hogs to this guy that was, 3 hours away?
Something like that.
3 hours away, you got to go sell these hogs. And he said, well, I'll go sell the hogs, then I'll come to the hospital. She said, perfect. I think in her mind, two things going to happen. She either had the baby or she lost the baby. So the husband gets to the farm and drives up and tells the farmer guy, "Hey man, I'm here." He goes, "Why are you here?" He said, "Well, I brought these hogs that you've been wanting." He says, "I'm not buying any hogs. I don't want any hogs." And come to find out, she had been texting herself back and forth, showing him this hog sale, but she's the one doing all of it to get him 3 hours away so she could go try to have this baby. It was all planned out.
Not to mention, she befriended other pregnant women that were all similar in due dates. So she had backup plans that if she couldn't get to this one, she'd get to the others. And unfortunately, it's just Reagan that was found.
Yeah.
And
She had backup pregnant women.
became the victim of it.
And it's just, the impact that it has had on us, like we say, it's something that'll never be forgotten. And I made the statement standing right there in the living room. I told him, I said, I'm through saying I've seen it all. Because every time I say I see it all, something worse happens. I said, so I've taken that out of my vocabulary. I no longer use that.
Because fetal abduction murders are so rare. I actually looked it up, and I think there's only 2 reported cases in the year 2020, one in Brazil and one in New Boston, Texas. That's how rare these kind of cases are. So like he said, we try not to jinx ourselves, and we have seen quite a bit, some really messed up cases, different types of scenarios. And now we can actually say we actually investigated one of those. And like you said, I really don't want to work another one like it ever again. It's one and done. But
the brutality that was done, I mean, she was beaten with objects. She was beaten with a 4-pound mason jar full of sand, and she was sliced. She was cut. Matter of fact, the scalpel type knife, at one time, a blade broken in the victim's neck. It was still in there.
Yeah.
It was, did they say that in the documentary? It was still in her neck. I think I heard that in a documentary, but I wasn't sure if it was a Netflix one. Oh, this is horrifying.
She was cut literally from, and I testified in court on this. I showed a photograph of a cut from back behind the ear that come all the way to right about here. And one of the things I pointed out in court is I believe that was one of the last ones of making sure that she is deceased. I believe she was on her stomach. I believe she walked up to her, raised her head, started here, and cut, because all this big cut was what we call a postmortem incised wound. There was.
I don't remember Casey Anthony and what she did, but I feel like to end them off, make sure that they were gone. This is so disturbing. Thank you, Donna, for being a member for 2 months. Appreciate you. And then I saw Bipolar Express, great content. Thank you for that. I appreciate you. It's very kind of you. This is like, I can't even believe it.
No blood in that wound. I had the incised wound up here where she was cut in the face. I could show the court what the blood looks like in the skin and on the fatty tissue. Here, I could show them how clean it was. And when it's clean like that, it's post-mortem because there's no longer any blood. And then she was cut from one hip to the other. She did not really, the baby and the uterus and all that was pretty well intact.
Yeah, the baby was not injured.
Okay.
The baby died pretty much because of
the sudden removement of the
traumatic extraction is the term the medical examiner used. It's mainly the mom was bleeding out so massively at that point that you're also denying that baby that blood flow. So it just wasn't going to survive outside after that much trauma too.
Oh my God.
And I've heard people try to dog on the state trooper that pulled her over, saying, "Oh, he should have known that wasn't her baby." So speaking from experience as an officer, if I pull over a woman and she's had a baby in her arms, she says she delivered on the side of the road, I'm not going to doubt it at first. And she went through some extremes to actually try to make it look like she gave birth. And it wasn't until she got to the hospital and the doctors actually confirmed, said, "Nope, you never gave birth." And she, even to that time, she is still lying to Oklahoma police saying, "No, it's my baby. I gave birth to it." Even after the doctor told her, "No, it's not medically possible." until she finally started giving up a little bit here and there.
And when the trooper pulled her over, she actually had the umbilical cord stuffed down
In her
in her
pants.
pants.
Yes.
So like, the trooper had no, you walk up, she's holding the baby. Okay, so what are you going to do? You're going to get an ambulance. That's all you can do. You can't do anything else. But luckily, I think he was going to pull her over because she was speeding. And then she called 911 asking for help. I just had a baby on the side of the road. And that's why it was like back to back. She knew that, hey, I'm fixing to get stopped. And she's just another part of the plan.
She planned out quite a bit. I don't think she is as smart as a lot of people think on certain aspects of it, but she did plan out a lot of good detail. How she kept her lies straight is unbelievable to me.
Oh my gosh, that's what we just said reading that document. We're like, dude, we need to like take notes at this point. Yeah, I don't think that the officer should be blamed. Like, is he supposed to assume that every pregnant woman is faking it and has someone else's umbilical cord shoved down their crotch? No. So I don't think that's fair. I think he did what he could as an officer. Yeah, I know. B12. People are upset because he wasn't doing CPR because he didn't know it was her baby. Cops. Yeah. Well, and like honestly, it was coming from out under her pants from what I heard. And like what are they supposed to, you know what I mean? Wow, this is worse than this. All the real information is actually far worse than what Netflix definitely put out there.
And she's even fooled other officers before.
Oh yeah, she's fooled a lot of people.
Yeah.
But one person she didn't fool was Kelly Crisp, our prosecutor. She did an excellent job, and I don't know if we would have gotten the death penalty if she was not the prosecutor. The way she prosecuted that case, the amount of time and effort she put into that, she knew that this woman could not ever see the light of day again because she would do something like this again. There's no doubt in my mind that she would do something like this again because she was just so manipulative and things like that. It was just it was an amazing job on their part too to get the conviction that we were hoping for.
And Taylor also messed it up with, she had other inmates write letters of confession to being there during the crime, and what she inadvertently did was she was actually putting truth in there,
and some truth in it.
But she was also deflecting it as she claimed, who was it, Kodiak?
Some
gang member named Kodiak actually did the murders, and she was just there. Well, there's one part in her letter she wrote that at some point Kodiak heard something at the front door of the house. So he looked out a window to see if somebody's outside. The problem with that is we could prove that actually happened. There was actually a bloody partial handprint right by a window by the front door. So inadvertently, she's saying someone else did it, but it's really her doing it. She's deflecting it. Mm-hmm. And that's how we were able to explain, well, that bloody handprint was Taylor. She's peeking out the window.
So she actually tried to make it look like their bandits did. We just read about this in the document if you guys missed it. Yeah, it was 113 STAB wounds.
Because she's hearing some ruckus outside and she's thinking, oh crap, they're after me now. Mm-hmm. And she did that on quite a few of her revisions of her story.
Yeah, she gave 3 or 4.
She'd give a little bit of fact here and there that we could prove through the crime scene evidence that she didn't realize we'd catch her on it.
You speak of the time that the prosecutor put in. What about the time you guys put in? How long were you at that scene initially? How many days did you go back to that scene? Kind of encapsulate all of that.
There was 4 of us working it. So you got 4 individuals working one scene. We were there for 13 hours.
Something like that.
13 or 14 hours working that scene. We left there 10 or 11 o'clock that night. Of course, had to be back at work at 8 o'clock in the morning. And it dominated all of our time, not including the time that I put in off duty looking for shoes and, just trying to piece things together. I couldn't begin to tell you how many man hours
we had took. Hours in the lab combing through every piece of evidence, because what people don't realize is all the evidence we collect that scene, we have to photograph again. We have to document it. We have to go through it with a fine-tooth comb a lot. And
categorize everything. We have to go to Swift's in Dallas, get everything that was removed from the bodies there. Any kind of evidence that we turn into a lab, we've got to take it to Garland, Texas, to the state crime lab. I did a trip with the prosecutors to the medical examiner's office so we could specifically talk to the medical examiners and the assistants that actually worked that case. That is the time I found out that she was hit in the back of the head with a hammer or a crowbar, because that information never was relayed to us. And with that information, then you can start tying up some loose ends, thinking, okay, this is why this is here. This makes sense. And things.
I want to know more about where they think the weapons were disposed of. It's crazy they haven't found them, but I mean, I guess not really. We hear about that a lot in other cases. I wonder, had she cut the cord, would it have helped? How did her husband think she was carrying a baby, though? He needs to be looked at more, in my opinion, says B12. Yeah, I have questions about that.
Like that.
Because we're kind of behind the curve when we're assisting in their agency. Sometimes we don't get all the information passed back to us. And because it was not just New Boston police working it, Texas Rangers were involved. So there's a couple times that information didn't get fully informed back to us until getting closer to the trial time. That's when we started getting more info.
More information.
Like, oh, well, okay, this now fits what we're seeing. If we would have known that earlier, we would have figured it out.
How many pieces of evidence are we talking that you guys processed?
I should have brought that. I got the
file.
You got a copy?
If you know offhand, I mean, we're talking hundreds, we're talking thousands. I mean,
No, we're talking
under 100.
Okay.
Yeah, it was under 100.
Okay.
Because at the scene, there's really, you have a lot of blood, but really, other than the jars that we knew of, the fingernails and things like that, we did collect a blanket that was in the floor because we didn't know if it was used to cover the child or what, if the blanket was even used. Was it in the floor when the incident started? Did she use it to try to soak up some blood? We didn't know, so we took that. So it wasn't a whole lot of a lot of physical type evidence as far as that's concerned. Of course, we go over and above trying to collect DNA.
Mm-hmm.
Fingerprints, we processed
Everything
areas.
for fingerprints. We had a bloody partial print on the wall.
Okay.
Cut the wall out to see, but we couldn't never identify that print of matching it up to either Taylor or anybody else. We couldn't identify it at all.
Were Taylor's fingerprints found at the scene?
No.
They were not. Okay.
The problem.
Wait, they found a print, but it wasn't either one of them, and then none of her fingerprints were found at the scene?
Identify that print of matching it up to either Taylor or anybody else. We couldn't identify it at all.
Were Taylor's fingerprints found at the scene?
No.
They were not. Okay.
The problem a lot of people don't understand about fingerprints is they think just because you simply touch something, your fingerprint's going to be on there and you can identify it.
Right.
That's not true. There's a lot of.
I bet you she had gloves on. Because she had that medical kit, right? And she disposed of the weapons.
Times that your fingerprints will go through motion, which will cause a smearing action,
Sure.
Especially bloody fingerprints are smearing everywhere. Then you can have the phenomenon of overlays where you have a fingerprint over another fingerprint over another fingerprint. And it's possible to try to find them identifiable, but it's very, very difficult. And we tried all techniques. We use chemicals on the blood stains to try to enhance them. Just couldn't ever get a good identifiable fingerprint to match to anyone. Even the victim, Reagan's fingerprints, we really didn't find in the house.
In her own house.
Yeah.
And we probably did more experimental things on this case, like with the shoe impressions and the blood and fingerprinting things differently on this case than we have others because of the uniqueness of it and just trying to get as much evidence as you can to prove. But like I said, we didn't even get the victim's fingerprints from the house.
Wow.
No foreign DNA or anything. So that was kind of gets a little disheartening, but everything else.
Because if I remember correctly, Taylor's DNA wasn't even found.
No, we
in
didn't.
the scene.
Wasn't even found. No, so she was definitely ready. She probably had gloves on.
Gloves on, hair tied back, all of it.
long sleeves
Yep.
where she got
Long
scratched or
sleeves,
something.
sure, yeah.
She
we
went
did
in
find
there.
hair in the victim's right hand,
Okay.
and then we thought, good, she pulled, because we thought she was fighting for her life.
Yes.
Thought she done pulled some of the suspect's hair. Come to
Yeah.
find out, it was her own hair because she's covering up and she's being beaten, and
Sure.
she's just pulling her own hair out.
Yeah.
Oh,
That is horrible. She had her own hair. Taylor showed up there like she thought she was a freaking doctor. Wow, Reagan literally fought for her and her baby's life.
we forgot to mention the 3-year-old was home at the
Yeah,
time.
the 3-year-old
this
was at the
happened.
house when all this occurred, and there was a diaper right there in the middle blood, like she had changed the child.
I don't think that ever actually truly happened.
I don't think it happened. Yeah, I don't think that happened. She may have got the diaper for the little one at first, because once she got the baby out, she placed the baby on the couch, and you could tell that by the fluids that was on the couch. But the baby, the 3-year-old, she had sent her back to her room. But she already seen
Too
what
much.
was going on. We had to
She didn't unalive the little girl, not that I wanted her to, but that's interesting. A crime so bad. Everything she did.
incident
And
that
then, like,
one
the
of
girl.
our old partners showed up next day or whatever.
Oh, yeah.
She was one of our crime scene partners at one time. She was working for a different agency at the time, and she had brought a dog. They had bought a dog from her, and she heard this happen, and the husband called her and said, "Look, I can't take this dog because of this incident." So she come over to get the dog, and she told us, the 3-year-old asked her, "Do you know my mama?" And she says, "Yeah, I sure do." She said, "Or you're not going to hurt her like the other woman did you?" So she seen, of course she had to reassure her that no, she wasn't, so the child was in there. And that's that's another thing that kind of sticks with you, the trauma that occurred to that child, and the family itself. I mean, it's just unfathomable. It's unbelievable that somebody would do something like this.
Because Reagan's mom found her, so she
Yeah.
had to see that. And then her stepdad, I think the stepdad was
Yeah.
there.
There's one when he got the child out of the house. So I mean, it's tragic. It's horrific. It'll never leave my mind. As long as I have a sound mind in this business, I may not have a sound mind for long, but it's you don't wish it on anybody, and being the crime scene guys, that's the way we look at everything in life. When we see these incidences with mass shootings and all that, and the first thing we think about is those crime scene guys. Man, that would be, if we had something like that happen, how would we work it? How would we do this? And in law enforcement, we're always learning. Unfortunately, we're in the business of reacting. So if something bad happens, like the Columbine shooting,
Yeah, I feel bad for the little girl. Sending her so much love. Hello, Abuelita. And thank you, the Angry Killjoy, for becoming a member. Appreciate you. Yeah, that little girl probably has some trauma.
police officers got all kinds of scorn and in trouble by their actions, but at the time in law enforcement, they did exactly how they were trained. You set up perimeters, you wait for your big boys, your SWAT team to get there, things like that. After that incident, now you start looking at things differently. Now we know, okay, you can't set up a perimeter. If there is a shooter in a target-rich environment, you go straight on, and you put yourself between that shooter and the targets, because then there's fixing to be a fight. And I promise you, I'm better trained than you are, and I'm fixing to win that fight. So now everything changes. So whenever we see incidents happen throughout the United States or overseas or whatever, we look at crime scenes. We get a lot of crime scene information, and we start thinking, okay, if this happens here, this is how we need to handle this. So things are always changing, especially in crime scene. Technology is changing every day. And so we kind of got to try to stay up with the technology and events to try to continue to learn.
I'm going to start with you, Spencer, with this, but the questions for both of you would answer individually on it. Does this case haunt you? Does this case
Oh,
pop
wow.
into your thought process? How often do you think about the events of this case? Is it something that, you'll be getting coffee somewhere and all of a sudden it just pops in your brain?
I think at this point in my career, they don't really pop as much in my head, especially since this case has been done for 3 years now. We've had other cases that fill the void in that time frame. Now, there are times that I might sit there and think about when I had my daughter, and I might think of just having a glimpse of a thought of the terror she went through. Also, a local Christmas parade of lights venue here in town, or actually out in New Boston, took my family out there one day. We're driving through, and they started having signs of in memory of Michael Page, a fellow deputy that was killed in the line of duty. Okay, that's cool. And then I see a sign saying in memory of Reagan Hancock and Braxton Hancock. I'm like, my wife was like, well, who's that? I said, that's the New Boston murder victims. And that just, as soon as you hear the names, it floods back to you. And then sometimes we'll have people just randomly ask, well, you are crime scene. Did y'all do that New Boston one? Yeah. And as soon as you bring it to our mind, we start thinking about it.
Yeah.
And we use it also as a teaching material because we also train other agencies on crime scene.
Oh, wow.
And because it's a unique case, we present it as, okay, here's what we got. Do y'all see anything wrong with it? Are y'all seeing what we're seeing? So these newer officers will understand the complexity and stuff like that. At this point, like me and Mark have discussed before, we're so far in our career that I guess we could say we're kind of damaged on the normal human seeing that would just have ungodly nightmares and terrors about it. We've seen stuff like this so much that it really doesn't bother me much anymore. I don't effectively lose sleep anymore over it. It still affects, it still hurts, but it's to the point where we don't constantly harp on it or think about it. Now, our junior guy in the crime scene unit at that scene, you could tell it bothered him. He kept wanting to talk about the case. And we were constantly like, once we're done with it, let's move on. Let's focus on other ones because we don't want to keep dragging up these kind of cases.
Yeah. And for me, over the years, I've got really good at compartmentalizing things that happen. So I haven't lost any sleep because I can compartmentalize. But the problem is that comes at a detriment to me as an individual. I've lost a lot of empathy. I've lost a lot of emotions and things like that because of my career in this business. Whenever you hear a friend or a family member that has passed away and you're like, okay, well, what are we going to do now? You start to, it's almost like, am I becoming like I'm not human because of the amount of trauma and devastation that we have seen. I've been doing crime scenes since 2002. So that's over 20 years just in crime scene. So I've seen a lot in crime scene. And then you start thinking, well, are we damaged goods? I know emotionally, where am I? Because I don't feel emotion. Everything is compartmentalized so much that whenever you go into a scene like that, we know that, okay, this body's laying here, that body's evidence. And we've got to speak for that body there. And so we look at things as evidence. What can this body tell us? And you have to put that wall up whenever you're doing that. You can't work it and say, she was pregnant, she was a mother, she's a mother to this child, she's a wife. You start adding the human aspects into it, and it'll really start messing with you. But yes, things come up that are reminders that remind, and you go right back, flashes of that scene, of all the amount of blood, of everything that you witnessed and that you've seen. Things do pop up, but I don't lose sleep. I've been blessed enough not to be able to lose sleep and be able to kind of keep things separated. I try not to take things home, But my wife can tell you that there's times when I come home and she'll just kind of back off because she knows, either by my facial expressions or the way I'm moving or talking, that okay, he's had a rough one. She's there if I want to talk. She's there. But when we first got married, she said, "How did your work go today?" It was okay. So, well, what'd you do? You never tell me what you did. I said, okay. I said, what I did today is I had the death of a 2-year-old that was beaten to death. And she goes, whoa. She goes, okay. She goes, I fully understand, but just know I'm here to talk if you're willing to talk. So I'm blessed with a wife that will listen to me, not harp on me. And she knows whenever I'm at that point, let's just give him some time and he'll come back to me. But there are times that you just kind of separate. There's times that I want to go home and I just want to sit, nobody talk to me, nobody bother me. I don't want to go to no events around people. I just want to be,
And that's
that's quite a bit.
Aspect of it is a lot of people don't realize in this line of work, our families take a punishment and beating on this too, because they're having to deal with our emotional responses. Like you said, sometimes my wife has actually made a comment that I appear cold sometimes. I'm sorry. We've been conditioned to the point of, like he said, when we show up and then we see a body, that's evidence. I can't sit here and dwell on thinking that's a daughter or a sister or somebody. It would drive me insane.
Yeah.
So we see as evidence and evidence only. That's always the biggest question we always get when they ask us about our job is, how do you deal with the dead bodies? We don't see them, unfortunately, we don't see them as human at that point. We can reflect on that later on.
Yeah.
But at the moment, we can't.
And we know, they're humans or somebody's dad, father, son, whatever. We understand that. But when you go into it, you can't go into it with that mentality. You got to go into it. This is evidence. We're here to do a job. That person, that body is speaking, and we got to be the ones to hear it. So.
Wow. That was really good. I'm glad we went over that. R.I.P. baby Reagan, or Mama Reagan and baby Braxton. R.I.P. Taylor Parker, you're a piece of shit. Respectfully. Actually, not respectfully. Wow. So much more worse than I thought from the Netflix documentary. That was heavy. So informative. Yeah, with that document too, that was a good document. They need to go to therapy. Yeah. She most likely did, unless Reagan had her down for a nap. I'm sure she heard or saw something. So sad. I've been traumatized from some stories I heard. I just can't imagine having that job. I'm gonna see a dead body there. Yeah, it's when they rescued the little girl, she was she was under like a blanket, right? In her room. I'm so glad that the little girl survived, but you have to wonder like the psychology behind, because if she cared about kids, she wouldn't have abandoned her kids. So if she cared about the little girl, like that's odd in the middle of a horrible, evil, terrifying, brutal, inhumane crime. There's no objective view in this case. Yeah, exactly. R.I.P. Reagan and baby Braxton. Shout out to you guys for being here the whole entire time. We went over the document. I like to make sure we get the facts with these Netflix documentaries. You can't pick and choose which kids to give a shit about. That's why I'm saying like that psychology would be interesting to learn more about. If you don't want to see a dead body, I promise you don't, especially. Yeah, no. I can't with kids, involving kids. Ugh, I can't. She was on the bed, wide awake and scared. I can't believe it. Anyways, shout out to you guys for being here. I will probably be back with more Taylor Parker. This is probably a good case to do a FOIA on. So I thought I had already submitted one. I shall look. I don't think Taylor cared about anyone. There's no light in her eyes. Demon. Yeah, please hit the like. Please hit the like. Okay, Kenzie live right after this. What I'm going to do is I'm going to go eat a snack, grab a drink or two. Y'all get ready for it. Calm before the storm. This wasn't very calm before the storm, though. This was kind of brutal. We're reviewing Kenzie Cuomo interview next, a couple of other stuff discussing the case. So come with an open mind, respectfully. Giddy up. Yeah, forever altered the child's life. R.I.P. Reagan and baby boy, baby girl. It was right, Braxton. But yeah, R.I.P. My heart goes out to everyone in the family too. I have it scheduled for 42 minutes from now, but if I finish my soup earlier, then I will probably be on earlier. So, I'll change the time or I'll just come on. Keep your eye on the notifications because if I finish sooner, then I probably will be on sooner. Girl, just kidding. I know. She's a psycho. I kind of knew B12. But we don't give a shit about you, Taylor Parker. Anyways, all right. Thank you guys for being here. Please hit the like button on the way out. Thank you to everyone who supported and became a member. We will probably have a members only this weekend. Yeah, I'll schedule that and look into that. But let's talk. I have some news for you guys in the next live. Make sure you guys hit the button. Thanks to everyone for being here, members, chatters, replay viewers. I'll see you guys on the next live. Bye.